Today's episode of Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard is all about the King of Harts, Owen Hart. But when it comes to saving your family money, the king of savings, well, that's First Family Mortgage. We'd be proud to help you save some money too right now at onefmc.com. You see, it's not a matter of if we can save you money, it really is a matter of how much. Spend 10 minutes with us right now and find out for free. It's no cost, no obligation, and you don't need perfect credit to do this. If we can't save you money, we won't waste your time. Bruce and I routinely help Something to Wrestle listeners save thousands of dollars. And I'm not saying just a little bit of money. I'm talking 60, 70, 80, in some cases more than $100,000 worth of unnecessary interest. And you can even skip your next 2 house payments right now at onefmc.com or give us a call toll free at 888-425-0105. NMLS number 65084, Equal Housing Lender.
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with mesothelioma? You probably have many questions, such as, what should I do? Where can I get more information? RGT4Law.com can answer those questions and help you get the money you deserve. Call 855-RGT4Law or visit RGT4Law.com and fill out the simple form for a free consultation. Robert Taylor, R.G. Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
The following program is an MLWRadio.com production.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.
Well, you know, that's not a rib. She booted. No, yeah, there's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you take cheeseburger, you take the gravy, well, you know, and then double layer, you know, it's called chicken salad. Double onion, you're nothing but an egg-sucking dog.
Throw it in your Google machine.
Goddamn, kid. God damn it.
What the hell show you got there?
I need more. Yeah.
What say you?
Pronouns, pal. And now, something to wrestle with. Con Bruce Prichard. The second most recognizable athlete in the entire world today. Conrad Thompson.
What happened when? What would Vince say about that?
Well, hey, Vince, tell me,
My shoulders look good tonight. It's so big. Let's go.
Bullshit.
Welcome to Wrestlemania.
World title now.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With.
Something to wrestle with.
Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. A very sick Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm here. I'm alive. And I apologize for my voice. I thought it was good. I went all day without talking. And then someone called me and I spoke to him on the phone. They said, you sound like shit. I said, but I feel better. So that's when I called you and said, hey, how do I sound? And you said, well, you sound like shit. I said, okay. Nothing like a bunch of positive reinforcement, by God.
Well, if nothing else, I want to try to be honest with you. You don't sound good, but here's the deal, guys. We don't do what everybody else does. We didn't put a bunch of stuff in the can. We instead said, you know what? These guys want us to be there. So we're going to be here, and we're going to do a fun show for you today on Owen Hart. But before we get there, we need to tell you that at the end of this show, we're going to give you 4 new poll topics as to how you can participate in shaping the show for next week. So tune in at the end of the show, and we'll tell you where to vote on that poll. And in the meantime, we want to thank everybody for going over to podsurvey.com/wrestle. We threw the challenge out last week that if you guys would help us get 3,000 surveys completed, we'd give you a bonus show. And I freestyled on Twitter and said, hey, help us get to 5,000 and we'll get you 2 bonus shows. Well, as always, you guys came through. We really appreciate that. I know some people questioned, so what do you guys get out of the survey? Well, we don't get anything, but what we do get is information to provide to our sales team. We're hoping to have some good ads here on the show, and we know you guys dig the ads with Bruce as Bruce Prichard, or as Paul Bearer, or as Dusty Rhodes, or as Jerry Jarrett, or as Demolition Smash, or the Ultimate Warrior, on and on and on. But we wanted to go ahead and gather some information so we could say, hey, who would be a good fit to advertise on this show? So we appreciate you participating. It means a lot to us, and look forward to those bonus shows in the future. Lots of questions about when are they going to be? Well, first, when Bruce isn't dying, and second, on a Wednesday. The last time we did this batch of bonus shows, we pushed them out on Wednesdays, and we're going to do the exact same thing for you here. So on a Wednesday in the near future, maybe this Wednesday, maybe the Wednesday after, let's see if Bruce can pull through, Wednesday at noon, you can start to look for those bonus shows. Anything you want to follow up on last week about Bruce? We did our Undertaker 93-94 episode. So lots of feedback, I'm sure, mostly good that I saw. What say you?
Well, yeah, all of it was good. It's funny, you know, we picked the time frame. We picked the initial. We can do probably 12, 15 more shows on Undertaker alone, kind of like Hulk Hogan and like Owen Hart. There's a lot of guys that have so much history that one show is not going to do it for them. So there were people that, well, you left this out or you left that out. But it was also interesting to me hearing from the people that were 10, 12 years old when the Undertaker versus Undertaker first came out, that were reliving that, saying, hey, no, I thought it was the Undertaker when I first saw him. And that was the audience we were gearing for anyway. So I think that we accomplished that. And that was nice to hear those fans that are listening to us now. And that's pretty cool. And it's also pretty damn cool, our fans being the greatest fans in the world, responding to our call to do the survey. I thought that was absolutely excellent.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys. It never ceases to amaze us just how avid you guys are and how much you support us. And we greatly appreciate you. We should mention that St. Louis VIP, if it isn't already, is going to be sold out by the time you hear this, I'm sure. It's at notarib.com. We're coming to see you on Father's Day. We're going to be right there at the South Broadway Athletic Club, right down the street from WWE's Money in the Bank. If you haven't already, cruise on over to notarib.com. There are very, very few VIP tickets available. I know that we still have some general admission. We should mention that we're running an early bird special. So tickets are cheaper right now than they will be a little later. So if you'd like to come check us out in St. Louis, man, we'd love to have you. We've got a great partner in the market in 590 Fan. And we've got some fun stuff planned, some surprises. If you enjoyed Orlando, man, you're going to dig this in St. Louis. And over at livenation.com or ticketmaster.com, you can pick up tickets to come see us SummerSlam weekend at Gramercy Theater. SummerSlam Saturday is what is on sale right now. VIP is completely sold out, but you can still pick up general admission. Just cruise on over to livenation.com or ticketmaster.com and type it in right there, something to wrestle. And Bruce, in July, you're going across the pond. Tell everybody where they can pick up tickets for that.
Can't wait. You can go pick up tickets at hookedonevents.co.uk. And we're going to be in Birmingham, England on Sunday, July 16th. On Monday, July 17th, we'll be in Manchester. Well, I will be with my English Conrad over there. And Tuesday, July 18th, we're going to be in London at the Walkabout Sports Bar. But you can get your tickets at hookedonevents.co.uk or wegottickets.com.
And if you got mesothelioma, where should you go, Bruce?
Well, you got to go visit our friends over at rgt4law.com for any of your legal needs. They can help you out.
Have you or a loved one been affected by mesothelioma? You may not have to file a lawsuit to get a recovery. Go to rgt4law.com and fill out the easy form for more information. Robert Taylor, RG Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
All right, Bruce, let's get into it. What happened when Owen Hart joined the World Wrestling Federation? What a phenomenal story we're about to tell. A fascinating story indeed. Usually on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard, we typically do one or two types of shows. We either cover a specific pay-per-view event or a wrestler. But this week, it's not just a wrestler, it's one everybody loved, Owen Hart. And it's going to be a little different because a lot of the episodes that we've covered for guys in the past, we start with someone who came in with a big push on top, like the $1 Million Man and all of his vignettes. Well, that's not exactly the Owen Hart story, and maybe that's part of the charm. But that's what we're going to break down here for Owen. And of course, everybody knows his very famous brother, former world champion, Bret the Hitman Hart. He's in the company when Owen first signs with the Fed in the summer of '88. And Bret is pretty hot as part of the Hart Foundation. And it looks like Owen is being forced to pull a gimmick out of the box of gimmicks because he gets saddled with, do you remember the original name, Bruce?
The Blue Blazer.
The Blue Angel.
Well, hang on. It was actually the Blue Blazer. The Blue Angel was a screw up by a couple of ring announcers.
How amazing!
I don't
is that?
remember. I don't remember him being a Blue Angel. I remember the thing I always heard was the Blue Blazer from day one. But I do remember from time to time people screwing up and calling him the Blue Angel. And I was like, he's not a damn Air Force pilot flying jets. But yeah.
Well, he debuts in the summer of '88. What I found was that it was July 8th in Redding, California. It was at the Civic Auditorium. It was a relatively small crowd, but sold out, 2,500 folks. His debut match in the company as the Blue Angel was Terry Gibbs. And it's interesting to note that in her book, Martha Hart, Owen's widow, kind of gave the indication that he really didn't plan or hope to be involved in the wrestling business. He didn't like all the travel and circus type atmosphere that his father Stampede Wrestling had when it toured across Western Canada. He just wanted a normal life. In an interview in '97, he said this about getting into wrestling. It sounded kind of neat to come home and say, Dad, I got a wrestling scholarship. Instead, I should have said, I don't want this. It took precedent over the whole purpose why I was going to university to get a degree. It's like I'm back in this wrestling, the curse of wrestling. And then he eventually, of course, sees all the success that his brother has. One thing leads to another. He finds himself in the business and unable to escape. When do you remember first meeting Owen or hearing about Owen in the wrestling business? And before you answer, may I suggest for your sore throat or your flu-like symptoms, a little bit of Grandpa's cough medicine, hashtag, it's Miller time.
Well, I first remember hearing about Owen. At the time, Stu's Calgary Stampede Wrestling was doing well, and Owen was working for Stu. But Owen was also going over to Germany for Otto Vons. And it was during a German tour that I first heard about Owen. They were talking about, oh my God, you know, the Hart brother, because everybody knew about the legendary Hart family from Calgary, and Stu Hart, the matriarch of the family. And obviously we had Bret, but there was Bruce and Smith and Ross and Keith, and the Harts were famous in the wrestling business, as well as the Hart Dungeon. But there was this rumbling coming out of Calgary, and then this rumbling coming out of Germany about, well, the Hart you want is the baby. Owen is the worker. Owen is the one that's going to be the star. And at the time, Owen was doing a lot of high-flying things, and he was doing the high-flying maneuvers long before it was in vogue to do. He was doing the moonsaults off the top and just doing a lot of things like that. A very innovative wrestler. And people were buzzing about Owen Hart. So I remember way back when in, would have been early 88, probably late 87, asking Bret about Owen and asking why Owen wasn't with us. And at the time, it was like, you know, hey, I've been telling Vince about him, and Owen is the one with the working boots in the family, and so on and so forth. Bret was always a huge fan of Owen. I think if Owen were to have a cheerleader in the business, his biggest cheerleader was his brother Bret. And we did some inquiries. I remember Owen coming through. I want to say he might have had a tryout at some point, but Vince, and I don't know this for a fact, but I just got the feeling that Vince felt he was a little too small, didn't have a lot of charisma, but the son of a bitch could work his ass off. And later on in 88, finally brought him in, and Vince didn't want to use him as a Hart because he already had the Hart Foundation and didn't want to confuse things with Owen. So he thought, well, we'll put a mask on him and make him a high flyer, and that would fit the role, which you've heard me talk about before, Vince's Mighty Mouse character, by having Owen Hart be the Blue Blazer.
And obviously his brother Bret is very successful with the company, and Vince already had an existing relationship with Stu. In 87, Owen is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Rookie of the Year, and now he's the Blue Angel. Or Blue Blazer, as you say, and just blame all the announcers. The announcers, man, they're really taking a beating these days. Shout out to Justin Roberts. What does and Morrow and everyone else. What does Owen think of this Blue Angel / Blazer gimmick?
I don't really remember. It wasn't like he was against it. It was a means to an end. It was a way to get in and get a job and be working on a steady basis. So I don't ever remember Owen saying, wow, I hate the Blue Blazer gimmick. I think that there were people in the industry that had seen Owen Hart, and when you're around Owen Hart, he's got so much damn personality, and he's an entertaining bastard, in front of the camera and behind the camera, that it was a little hard to justify putting a mask on him and not letting him be who he is. But there also, you have to understand the other side of Owen Hart, the personality and flamboyance and all that. He was very shy too, in a lot of ways.
So is the goal because he's shy, or because he's smaller, or because he's going to be a quote unquote underneath guy? Hey, let's put a mask on him and make him look like he crawled off a comic book.
Well, again, like I said, Vince always had a fascination with these. If he was a smaller guy and could do a lot of flips and flies, then I'll make him my Mighty Mouse character. Vince loved Mighty Mouse. Oh, what the hell?
Hashtag it's Miller time. Catch me up a little bit about, the concept of why you put gimmicks on guys. It feels like at the time, does everybody get a gimmick like this, or are there some that maybe have the volume turned up a little more because you're trying to overcompensate for the fact that you don't think they're going to be a headliner? So let's try to spice them up, so to speak, if they're going to be lower on the card, whether it's Red Rooster or it's Blue Blazer. Those type of gimmicks feel like something that is reserved for lower and mid card talent.
Well, no, I think that at the time, Vince was very gimmick oriented. I think everybody that came in, he wanted them to have a unique personality and a gimmick that he could capitalize on. And he looked at everybody as to how he could make that gimmick larger than life. So
I'm wrong. And the Blue Blazer, at least in Vince's mind, could have potentially been the world champion one day.
I think that in Vince's mind, at one point, he wanted to eventually get to the unmasking of Owen Hart.
Okay.
But at that time, it was an entry point for him.
Do you remember? Go ahead.
But again, this goes to when you look at talent and you're out evaluating. This was my criteria that I had this was directly from Vince. Was, there are a million mechanics out there. There are a lot of great, good hands, carpenters. But when we were out looking for talent and you're searching for that right talent, you want to look at the guy and say, you know what, one day I can see him main eventing WrestleMania. And if you're going to put that much effort into anything, you want to do it with at least that hope at some point. Now, not everybody fits that criteria by Make no mistake about it. Not everybody is going to fit that. Owen fit that. Owen Hart did. I don't know if the Blue Blazer did. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I think that was in Vince's mind, he could get to revealing who Owen Hart was or who the Blue Blazer was.
In his first week with the company, he injures his knee, and it gets a little more severe on July 14th. So it looks like in his first match, he re-injures it, and it gets a little more severe a week later. But he doesn't miss that much time. He's back flying again a week later, and they're all over the place. It's worth mentioning. California one week, New York the next, back to California the following, just all over the place. Very early on in his career, through August, he is working with Barry Horowitz in opening matches on the card, which I guess is one of the things I struggle with, because if he really saw something in him, I don't know that it'd be working first match on the card and against Barry Horowitz, especially if you were a PWI Rookie of the Year the year before. I realize it's a kayfabe award, but still, at this point early in his career,
I don't think Vince knew what a PWI Rookie of the Year was.
No, you know what I mean, though. The guy clearly comes in with some fanfare, some recognition for what he's been able to do in Canada and Japan. And it doesn't feel like this is a similar type debut to a Mr. Perfect or a $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. And I realized that those guys worked in more American territories, but this obviously isn't befitting of maybe where he will wind up.
No, but I think everybody's got to start somewhere.
Oh, for sure. Let's talk about moonsaults, because very early in his run as the Blue Blazer, do we start to see him doing splashes off the top rope and sunset flips. But I think one of the first moonsaults I ever saw as a kid was when the Blue Blazer did it. Now everybody does them. I mean, even the big guys like Vader have done them. Do you remember the first time you saw a moonsault? Was it the Great Muta? Was it Owen Hart? Do you recall who first did it?
Wow, I recall Owen Hart, that being a big part of his repertoire that everybody was raving about. And he was so damn smooth. Owen had worked with, what the hell was the guy's name? They called him Makan Singh in Calgary. Mike Shaw, who was also Norman the Lunatic and ended up being Ash the Booger. He was another one that everyone was raving about at the time. And people actually said to us that it was Makan Singh that was the star in the Owen Hart, Makan Singh Wars. Once we got to see both of those guys, that was clearly evident who the star in that was. But that was funny. But yeah, as far as the moonsault, Owen was one of the first guys I ever saw do it.
I think
I saw moonsaults going back Chavo Guerrero and Gino Hernandez back in the day in Houston in the 70s.
I think Mondo Guerrero, Eddie's brother, is widely credited with inventing it in the 70s. And I think Leaping Lanny Poffo was probably the first to use it in the WWF. But as a kid, my first memory of seeing it, because I'm not nearly as fucking old as you, was the Blue Blazer. And then eventually, by the end of August, he's no longer the Blue Angel, which Bruce says he never was. I guess that's just rumor and innuendo. And he's being announced as the Blue Blazer. And he makes his television debut August 24th, 1988, in front of 16,000 fans in Hartford, Connecticut. That's at least when it's taped. He also works a wrestling challenge taping, wins in a couple minutes with a moonsault. So very quickly, the moonsault kind of becomes his signature move, and he starts to do that, I guess, as his finisher. He has a match on Primetime Wrestling in October that airs on November 1st when he pins Boris Zukov. This time he uses a crossbody off the top, and he gets a little bit more time, 7 minutes and change. But he's continually working Barry Horowitz quite a bit. He also has the Brooklyn Brawler, Jose Estrada, also known as Conquistador #1. He even has a series of matches in November with Danny Davis, the former referee and member of Jimmy Hart's stable. But with Survivor Series 1988, that is where we bring the Blue Blazers pay-per-view debut And that is when we see him in Richfield, Ohio at the Coliseum on November 24th. A huge crowd, 13,500 in attendance. He is teaming with the Ultimate Warrior, Jim Brunzell, Sam Houston, and Brutus the fucking Barber Beefcake. They take on Honky Tonk Man, Greg Valentine, Ron Bass, Bad News Brown, and Danny Davis. What a hodgepodge group of folks this is. Valentine winds up defeating the Blue Blazer by submission with the figure 4 at 11 minutes and 22 seconds after Honky pushed Blazer off the top rope behind the referee's back. This is a big deal in everybody's career. You know, the first time you're on TV and the first time you're on a pay-per-view. And in '88, Survivor Series was one of the really big shows. Do you remember having any sort of conversations about whether or not this was a big deal to the Blue Blazer for him to be featured on pay-per-view?
No, I don't. It was another pay-per-view event, and it was simply, I tell you, listening to that group of guys that were in that match were all guys that gelled together. Bad News Allen was from Calgary, so Owen had a history with him.
Right.
Of course, Beefcake's just got history with everybody. He can work with everybody, and Valentine back and forth. But I can see that kind of eclectic group being matched up for all those reasons. The only odd one in that whole group is Warrior.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a game of which one of these is not like the other with some of those guys.
Exactly.
I did find it interesting that he works Madison Square Garden on December 30th, 1988. 16,000 fans in attendance. Does a 20-minute time limit draw with the Red Rooster.
Ooh, that hurts. Sorry.
He finishes the year out in Hartford, Connecticut at a matinee show, and this time he gets pinned by the Red Rooster. So it's not looking promising for the Blue Blazer. But we head into 1989, and he kind of picks up where he left off. This time he starts working with Mr. Perfect in late January, and he's losing all the time, of course. He goes to a Superstars taping on February 15th. That aired on March 4th. And it's announced that both Mr. Perfect and Blue Blazer will be on the card at WrestleMania 5 and against each other. And that's probably the first time I really remember, like I can pinpoint watching that show. Mr. Perfect and Blue Blazer at WrestleMania 5. This one took place at Trump Plaza, April 2nd, 1989. 18,000 fans or so in Atlantic City to see Mr. Perfect win with a forearm blow and a perfect plex in about 6 minutes. And this is Mr. Perfect's debut wearing a singlet, I believe. And after this, he has a series of uneventful matches. But you said he didn't really have a conversation with him about him appearing on Survivor Series. But WrestleMania 5 was your pay-per-view debut too. Or not debut, but WrestleMania debut. It's a big deal when you work your first WrestleMania. So did you have a conversation with Owen about WrestleMania 5?
Did I tell you about this?
I know about you smoking weed and hiding your drugs when the cops came. That's all I know about that story.
No, actually, I do. I remember this being Owen's first WrestleMania, and I do remember talking about it. You know, there had been, I want to say this is where I believe Keith had passed, and I remember talking to both Bret and Owen. It was kind of a sad time, but Owen and I, for whatever reason, maybe because we're both we were both born last in the family. We were the babies of the family, and kind of felt that or maybe our older brothers overshadowed us a little bit, and people always kind of referred to them first. And maybe Owen and I had a little bit of a bond there. But I do remember talking to Owen about how cool this was, you know, your first WrestleMania, and it was a cool thing to me, and it was, I know that meant something to him. WrestleMania in general did mean something to Owen. I remember later years, Owen always bringing the family, bringing Martha and the kids to Mania and dressing them up. It was always fun to see the whole family there.
Do you remember at this time Owen being unhappy?
No.
Martha wrote in her book, Owen went from being the star of the show everywhere he went to being one step above being a jobber. In the early days, jobbers were generally overweight, sloppy, nameless guys who got squashed by the stars every night. Owen felt he deserved better. The money was good, but that wasn't what mattered most to Owen. He was disgusted at having to predominantly wrestle in the early matches where he was given little respect and no major push or storylines. He resented the fact WWF bigwigs made it seem like the wrestlers should be so grateful to be working there. Although most wrestlers felt that way, Owen didn't. Does that sound off base to you?
I'm not going to get into, bashing and debating what Martha feels and or felt at the time. But I can tell you from my dealings with Owen Hart, no, he didn't express that to me. Not at that time. There were times when Owen was frustrated, yes.
How does his run end here? Because in my research, I found his last match was June 26, 1989. It was in Glen Falls, New York at the Civic Center. And in his time away, he goes back to Stampede Wrestling. And Stampede closes its doors in December of 89, and then he hits the independent circuit. So in the summer of 89, how do you remember this separation coming to be?
I think that Vince kind of saw that the Blue Blazer had run its course, I guess. And he wanted to do something with Owen. But at the same time, I want to say that his dad, Stu, also wanted Owen back at home in Calgary for the business. And if Owen was unhappy, then maybe that was, a time and a way for him to get back home and go be with the family and do things in Calgary closer to home. And that was an excuse. But for me, one-on-one with Owen, he never expressed that to me. At the time, it's just a time, hey, this is take a break. We've done what we can do with the Blazer.
So as I said, he goes back to Stampede. He does some tours of Germany for Auto Ones. He works some New Japan, even Mexico in 91 for the UWA. And there, the Blue Blazer maybe means something different because it's about wearing a mask. We'll cover that in a minute. But he does have a series of pretty big matches with Connect, Liger, Haas, Wild Pegasus, which is Chris Benoit, Kobayashi. I mean, lots of big names that you maybe have heard about internationally. But then he eventually loses the Blue Blazer mask in 1991 against El Connect. So that's the end of a Blue Blazer for quite a while. And then he shows up in WCW and debuts on TV on March 16th, 1991. The first of 5 TV matches he would compete in for WCW, all of which were against prelim talent. So that's a pretty short stint. Do you remember there being any sort of, damn, we dropped the ball on that guy when he shows up over there?
I think that there was a little bit, I don't recall if that was a sentiment exactly at that time. I recall going back originally, I think that everybody kind of felt that putting the mask on Owen Hart, not just bringing Owen Hart in, was kind of dropping the ball a little bit from day one. I don't know that you're going to find too many people that are going to line up and tell you, hey, the Blue Blazer was a great gimmick. And it was the only thing we could have done because the idea behind going after Owen Hart and bringing Owen Hart into the company was Owen Hart. And those that knew him, and once you got to be around him, you fell in love with him. So I think that people, for the most part, felt that we dropped the ball by not capitalizing on who Owen was.
For whatever reason, he doesn't stick around WCW very long. He comes back to the WWF around November 91, and Bruce wasn't with the company then, so we'll just run through this. Real quick, Meltzer wrote, going back to the WWF was not his first choice of a lifestyle. He'd gotten married to Martha on July 1st, 89, and bought his first home. The two went together on lengthy German tours, which they loved because it was so many days straight playing in the same city. So during the day was almost like being on vacation, and the job had very little time away from Martha. He tried to get into the Calgary Fire Department with the idea that this would be his steady job since Stampede Wrestling was going to close down, and he'd continue to do Japanese tours, but then he couldn't get on those tours. So with mixed emotions at first, he went back to the WWF. This time, though, he's teaming with Jim the Anvil Neidhart as the new foundation, obviously trying to recapture the old magic that his brother had with Jim Neidhart. But Neidhart is out of the company by February of 92. You want to comment on why Neidhart was out in February 92?
I don't recall. Probably just Jim being Jim.
But all in all, it does look like Owen was getting ready to be booked in a better spot this time, despite the hammer pants. The new foundation is going over in matches against the Nasty Boys, the Orient Express, Beverly Brothers, and even the Powers of Pain. When finally Neidhart is out officially in March of 92, Owen gets paired with Koko Beware.
The Birdman.
And this time they're high energy. High Energy is wrestling a series of matches against the Beverly Brothers, and Owen gets booked at Wrestlemania 8 against Skinner. Well, Owen won the match in 1 minute and 10 seconds with a roll up. So at least Owen was on Wrestlemania. After Wrestlemania, it starts to look like Owen's stock is declining a little bit again. This time he's working singles match against Skinner and tag matches against the Nasty Boys and Beverly Brothers. But then High Energy starts to be booked against maybe a lower team with Barry Horowitz and Skinner in late 92. And then they start losing to the Head Shrinkers on a pretty regular basis. This was actually taped on December 15th of 92, but it didn't air until January 10th of 93. And here we have an interview with Raymond Rougeau and Owen Hart. And Owen is attacked by Razor Ramon. And it looks like this is the first time that Bret and Owen are worked into an angle with each other. Razor's getting ready for a match against Bret for the WWF title at the Royal Rumble. And of course, Bret would successfully defend that belt against Razor. So on January 26th in Fresno at the Convention Center, they do a wrestling challenge, and Bret, who's now the champion, teams with Owen, and they defeat the tag champs of Ted DiBiase and IRS in a non-title match. So after a little bit of bouncing around, the Blue Blazer, Jim Neidhart, no more Blue Blazer, Koko Beware,
No Blue Angel.
no Blue Angel. So there's a lot of different moving parts here, but finally Owen and Bret are put together. How did this come about?
Real simply, I mean, it was a no-brainer. Bret was the champion, and his little brother's there working. Why not put them together? And to be able to use Owen in the role that has often been used, you look at Jack and Jerry Briscoe. Jerry was the little brother. You can get heat on little brother, and big brother can come in and come to the rescue and save you. So you send little brother in to go get his ass kicked, and big brother comes in to make the save and be the hero. So it was a way to get Owen Hart kind of into a singles role, but at least get him into the mix. And Owen can hang with everybody on the damn roster. Question was, not everybody on the roster could hang with Owen Hart. But it was just a way to get Owen into the mix, and it was logical to do it with Bret.
So that same night, they start to transition away from Koko and Owen when Koko has to be helped backstage by two referees in the middle of a tag match with DiBiase and IRS. Eventually, Owen and Koko get the win by DQ after Owen's in there in essentially a handicap match since Koko can't go, and the heels keep pulling Owen off the canvas after several 2 counts when they could have just won the fall. Eventually, the champion brother Bret Hart makes the save, and by March of 93, it looks like High Energy's done, and Owen is back to singles competition. Now he's winning a string of matches against Terry Taylor. Still kind of low on the card, but
anytime you work with Terry, you're low on the card.
Woof. So lots of matches in a row all over, from Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Canada, Iowa, back to Canada, Minnesota, New York, Indiana, Virginia, just all over the place. So at this point, Owen starts to do a little bit of business with the USWA, which we talked about on our Undertaker episode. June 21st, 1993 in Memphis, Tennessee at the Mid-South Coliseum. Owen Hart defeats Papa Shango for the USWA title. This puts Owen into a series of matches with Jerry Lawler, where, of course, Owen eventually dropped the title to Lawler, but who didn't? This time, it was July 5th, 1993, This is a natural fit because Lawler is working a heel angle against Bret in the WWF. So Memphis fans get to see their hero against Bret's brother right there in their hometown of Memphis.
Because Lawler got it. Lawler understood. You use the little brother, you get heat on the little brother to work with the big brother. And it worked. And that was one of the issues that we did with Owen, was sending him down there. It was just logical. We actually wanted to do more of that on our TV, and Vince kind of, nah.
So later in the summer of 93, Owen is wrestling a series of matches against Papa Shango and Bastion Booger, but this time he's losing. And then at SummerSlam, Owen is booked again with Barry Horowitz. He beats him in about 8 minutes with a missile drop kick. And Owen is still engaged from the outside in the feud with Lawler and his brother Bret. And then we start to talk about the whole Bret Hart, Owen Hart feud, which I think is what everybody is probably tuned into this show for. Meltzer wrote, Bret, who originally didn't want to do the family feud idea again because he wasn't happy doing it so publicly a few years earlier with Davey Boy Smith, even though they produced one of the WWF's all-time classic matches at Wembley Stadium. Eventually, he relented, and they did the angle. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit in, quick fashion. Catch me up. The original idea from the company was not to have Bret feud with Owen. It was another Hart. Do I have that right?
No. Okay, let's back up even a little bit further. The original idea was for Bret to feud with Owen. Vince did not see it. Pat and I, and Bret didn't see it, frankly. Bret didn't like it. Bret didn't see it. Vince didn't like it. Vince didn't see it.
Now, to be clear, it's not that Bret didn't see value in Owen. Bret didn't see feuding with another family member.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now.
And what Vince didn't see was Bret feuding with Owen. Not necessarily anti-family.
No. God damn it, pal. Brothers don't fight. Okay, to all my listeners out there who have family members, do you not fight from time to time?
Yes.
And if you have a brother with few years range, you fight. It doesn't even matter. You fight. Family fights. They have disagreements. They fight. And it was so real to me. Maybe you know what? Maybe I'm weird because I always fought with my family and constantly feuded with my family. And people, my friends, they all did the same thing. Wouldn't speak for years over just minuscule bullshit. But Vince wasn't, I don't know if he wasn't raised with his brother, but he didn't really know his brother that well. And he cherished that relationship so much that he couldn't imagine fighting with his brother. And I'm sitting there telling him, no, you don't understand, man. The more you love somebody, the more intense that fight is. The more you love someone, the more intense that hatred can become. And it's also something that I felt every single person walking the planet could identify with. Because everybody has family, and everybody could relate to feuding with their family. Your brother says something off color in front of your girlfriend that just to get your goat and piss you off, you hold that against them for years. That's real life. Vince didn't see it. So we kind of dropped it. And then as we got into it a little bit more, we got into the family thing. And Bruce Hart had sent Vince a letter. And he basically was critiquing the product. Now, Bruce Hart is one of the most creative minds the business has ever known. Extremely creative. And probably one of the best writers. When you read his letters and you read the things he's written, very articulate, a master with the pen. And Vince read this letter and this whole storyline that Bruce had developed, and the idea that Bruce had pitched was that Bruce would come in and eventually turn on Bret. And Vince loved the idea. It was presented from a different person with a different person involved. So now all of a sudden he loves it. We go back to Bret. We pitch it again. And Bret comes back with not hating it this time. He says, well, I like the idea, but I want to do it with Owen. And this was and he had it for a few days. He sat on it for a while before he came back and said, I'll do it, but I want to do it with Owen. And Pat and I are secretly, we're doing the, cheering silently where nobody can hear us, because it's what we had pitched beforehand that everybody shit all over. And now, essentially, they've worked themselves into a shoot where we're going to get our Bret Owen feud. And Vince was like, okay, Bret, if that's what you want, then we'll do it with Owen. So that's how that thing got started.
So chat me up about this, because I don't know when we'll talk about it again. You're not going to want to talk about it, but you mentioned it, and I wasn't going to. Talk to me about Vince's relationship with his brother.
You know what? I don't know. They're good now, but I think that his brother was raised by someone else. Vince was raised with his mom in North Carolina. They didn't see a lot of each other, best of my knowledge. And his brother has a successful business here in Houston. I actually met his brother Rod before I met Vince.
So his brother, he has one brother, and his name is Rod, and he's younger than Vince or older?
I think that Rod is older. I think.
Okay. So Rod,
but he actually called the Houston office one day, and I answered the phone. He explained who he was, and he asked for tickets to our event. And I said, sure. He came down, he introduced himself to me and Paul, said that he and Vince didn't have a really good relationship, that they hadn't spoken in years, but he wanted to come to a wrestling show. And this was before Houston Wrestling was with the WWF. And we brought him in and treated him like family. He was a really nice guy. And in later years, they bridged that gap and have become close again. And the whole family, I mean, they're all one big happy family now. And Vince's brothers speak regularly, best of my knowledge. But I know the last time that I saw them, they were all good.
Well, so there you go. You never know what you're going to hear here on Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Tell your friends, leave a review, read all about it. Without getting into so much of Lawler's issues at the time, which we'll circle back to, you guys start to build the tension in Bret and Owen. And so, plans change, as our friend Dave Meltzer says. But on the Survivor Series, we see this kind of get escalated a little bit with Bret and Owen. And it becomes maybe the more primary piece of business for Bret and Owen that night. Kind of curious through what the storyline was and how that all played out.
Well, the storyline was going through the whole thing with Jerry Lawler and Lawler attacking the entire Hart family and talking about Stu and Helen and that whole mishmash there. And that the whole Hart family was coming to avenge the Goodbye God Hart name. So leading up to this, it was little things that Bret would do that would, in Owen's eyes, steal the thunder from him. So if you're looking at it as a petulant baby brother, that really deep down you yearn for the glory and you want all that for yourself, and your big brother is constantly outshining you and doing things and getting the glory, that jealousy builds up to where eventually it's going to spew. And the little things that Bret did would be, to the casual viewer, would just be things that Bret would normally do from his viewpoint to protect his brother, to protect his family name, and to protect his brother. And in Owen's eyes, so you could see it from both sides, would be stealing the glory. So once you get to that point, through Owen's eyes, all Bret was doing was, by getting the win and by doing everything himself, Bret stole the win and stole the glory that night, all for himself, to where Owen was finally fed up. Enough is enough.
So Survivor Series 93 has so much going on, with the plan originally being Lawler's. All of a sudden, Shawn Michaels is in there. Rio Rogers has a brief little piece of business. Terry Funk is supposed to be there. He no-shows. Lots of craziness. I can't wait for us to talk about Survivor Series 93. But that's where we first see some of the problems happen, with Owen becoming visibly upset with Bret for having him be pinned before leaving the ringside area. Let's fast forward. Even though this feels like a very patient build, by the way you guys paced out the Owen and Bret Hart angle. Is all of this can we take away that most of this was what Bruce had written, just you guys putting some polish on it?
The turn was what Bruce had written. It's what we had originally written way back when, and the idea behind it was to get to the very first one-on-one meeting between the brothers at WrestleMania. So that was the slow build to the turn, and then after the turn, the slow build to the match, with Bret not wanting to have anything to do with the match. Don't want to fight my brother.
Royal Rumble 94, we've already covered in great detail. It is available now in the archives for your enjoyment, but we'll briefly touch on it here. It's January 22nd, 1994, Providence, Rhode Island. Bret and Owen are going to be tagging to take on the tag champs, the Quebecers, with Johnny Polo. As we all know, Ouellette has one eye, and what is that?
It's a miracle.
Why is it a miracle exactly?
So you catch a fucking ball. Fuck you, Conrad.
Okay.
Nostra fucking Meltzer too.
So the Quebecers win a match about 17 minutes in. The referee.
I like the way you said that. And the Quebecers won a match.
Well, they did.
Almost as if it was few and far between. They won a lot of matches, man.
Well, they won this one by referee stoppage because of the amount of pain that Bret was in because of his knee. That's real life. Bret had the sharpshooter on Pierre, but could not keep it on due to the amount of pain he was suffering. And afterwards, do you remember what happened?
Owen Hart kicked the shit out of him. That's all he had to do. Is that what you were looking for?
Owen kicked his leg out of his leg.
Yes, well, he kicked his leg out when Bret was trying to get up with one leg, and Owen kicked the shit out of it.
So he kicked,
and it was just one kick.
You're missing what I'm saying. Owen's doing an interview backstage on the giant video screen as they're helping Bret to the back. And he says, "That's why I kicked your leg out of your leg."
That's right.
Fucking awesome.
That's awesome. It was live.
Absolutely it was. So now we're set. And they actually announce on February 20th, 1994 that WrestleMania 10 is going to be Bret versus Owen, brother versus brother. WrestleMania 10 we have yet to cover here on the show. I can't wait to do it in long form. Pretty awesome card in hindsight, especially when you consider the first match on the card is Bret and Owen. It's March 20th, 1994. It's a sellout. 18,000 in the venue, 4,200 in the Paramount. The curtain jerker, man, who'd imagine? But what a barn burner it was. 20 minutes in, Owen gets the pin after blocking an attempted victory roll, and Todd Pettengill conducts a backstage interview with Owen regarding his victory. Of course, Owen is now bragging that he is the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. It went on to say that Bret has no chance in his world title match later in the show. And Meltzer wrote, one of his 2 or 3 best matches ever in the company and among the greatest bouts in company history. That's what Nostra fucking Meltzer said. What say you, Bruce? What'd you think of this classic match between the Hart brothers here at WrestleMania 10?
It was classic. It was the perfect way to start WrestleMania 10. Nobody was calling it. No one thought in a million years. And a big part of it was the summer tour that we had coming up, which was the WrestleMania Revenge Tour. And headlining that all around the horn was Bret versus Owen. So what better way to set that up? Because their very first encounter, Owen beats Bret. So Owen's got bragging rights. He's the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be. And now he's going to take the one thing that means more than anything to Bret, and that's the championship. So it was a slow build, but it was very, very calculated, and it's something that you don't see today. They don't have the time. They won't take the time to build something that slowly and to just let it fester until people, just have to have it. But the match was absolutely excellent, I thought. And Owen Hart shined that night.
No doubt about it. And Bret would have his moment later that night, of course, pinning the champ Yokozuna to win the title after about 10 minutes. And before the show goes off air, you see Owen come ringside and stare at his brother inside the ring. So then this thing is far from over. And it's a far cry from the Blue Blazer, man. Just a few years prior to this, it's not looking so hot for him. But now you've got a phenomenal storyline that kind of starts with the Hart brothers and it ends with the Hart brothers. And right after WrestleMania, they go on a European tour, as they often do. And they're all over the place. 9 matches in 10 days. What are your favorite memories of some of those European tours with Owen Hart? Because it feels like with his reputation as being one of the world's biggest ribbers, he would have a phenomenal time on a 10-day tour being hemmed up with all the guys. Am I right?
To those that are listening to this, that get this, you will get it. To those that don't, I don't really know how to explain it to you as to why it's so funny. But you talk about Owen Hart and the European tour, and it's the meal is gratis. That means you pay nothing. Which was Owen's thing when guys would come down, and catering on European tours. They feed you around the clock, and you arrive at a hotel at 4:00 in the morning. You walk into the hotel and they immediately usher you into another room where there's a huge buffet sitting out for you to, for late night snack or an early breakfast, whatever. And then they have breakfast downstairs in the dining room, and then you're served lunch in a separate room, and then incredible catering that day in the evening. But that was Owen's little saying was, it's gratis. That means you pay nothing. It was funny to us. It was one of those, you had to be there, but those that get it, those that were around Owen can get a chuckle out of his overuse of that little phrase there. Yeah, Owen had the reputation as a ribber, and Owen would call guys' rooms early. If they had a 6:00 wake up call, he'd call them at 4 and get them up downstairs in the lobby. Come on, what are you doing? Goddamn, the bus is getting ready to leave. We're all waiting on you. Hurry up. We don't have time to shower. Get out, get your bags, get your shit together. Let's go. And do an imitation of Tony Garea or one of the agents. Little things like that. I remember this is Jim Myers has since passed, and it's not in bad taste. It's kind of an Owen Hart sense of humor thing. Jim Myers had a colostomy bag. Jim had some problems and would often have issues with his bag. And Owen Hart comes in one day, just as serious as can be, and goes up to Vince and says, "Hey, Vince, George the Animal Steel got stopped at the border. They threw him in jail." He says, "Oh my God, what the hell? What for?" And he says, "Smuggling shit across the border." It's not a great taste.
Oh my God.
But that was Owen's sense of humor. And he was...
Hang on. On that note.
There you go. Roll Tide.
Hashtag it's Miller time.
You got my wife saying Roll Tide.
Your wife has good taste.
Pisses me off. But There were times that, and again, he picked on Jim. Jim had a really strong air freshener because he was very self-conscious about this, and he would spray this air freshener that would mask anything. Well, Owen stole the air freshener. So Jim, who's self-conscious anyway, and then Owen would tell everybody, hey, just like be sniffing around and move away from Jim like he stinks. He's going to go look for his air freshener thing. He's not going to have it. He's going to become self-conscious because he's going to think he smells and he can't spray the stuff. And everybody just kind of look at him like he stinks. It was just little shit like that Owen, little shit, get it? That Owen would do that it was harmless, but it could break up the monotony on a long trip. I went on a safari with him in South Africa, and he just made it fun. He made everything fun. He would just take the laces out of one of your shoes.
Not both, or one.
Just one. No, you just don't, or just take one. You never take them both. You just take one. So, or just cut the laces off right at the eyelets. You got laces, but you can't tie them. It was juvenile pranks that were just absolutely endless. I don't know that Owen ever did anything really mean-spirited, but his shit could be so damn funny. The impressions you've heard, the stories about Owen calling his dad and pretending to be Reggie Parks. And Stu and Reggie were long time friends, traveled up and down the roads together. And they were both at Wrestlemania. So Owen calls his dad's room and pretends to be Reggie Parks. And talks about, hey, Stu, back in the day, you couldn't take me. You're just overblown. Your reputation, your mouth overloads your reputation. I could have taken you any time. And Stu is like, yeah, well, Reg, if you felt that way, why didn't you try me then? You want to do something about it? And Owen's like, I'll meet you downstairs, you old fart. I'll take you right now, right here. This will be Wrestlemania right now. We can go down. And Stu gets all up into this huge just fit in his room. And apparently Helen or somebody, but it dawns on Stu all of a sudden. That damn Owen. Just because he realized Reggie would never do that. And he realized Owen had got him. But Owen was notorious for he had Jim Duggan down at the front desk one time, telling Duggan to come down that his credit card didn't go through, and he had to come back down. And Duggan would come down, and they would say, "Oh no, sir, there's no problem with your credit card." And Duggan would go back to his room, and Owen's sitting in the lobby the whole time. Owen would go back to his room. Owen would go back to the house phone and call Duggan. Say, oh yeah, this is front desk. Either you need to come down here and fix this credit card thing, or you're gonna have to leave. You just need to get out now, sir. And Duggan would come back down. Hey, this is a tough guy. I came down here just you told me everything. I don't know what's going on. And Owen would just be sitting in the corner laughing his ass off. Those were some of the harmless but funny things that Owen would get you with.
We've all heard about how popular Bret was in Europe. How was Owen received over there?
Is a heel? Very well. They didn't like him because he was opposing Bret. But Owen was received, I think, everywhere very popular. And Owen was a name in Europe, in Germany, prior to that, as Owen Hart. So they knew him. He was a star.
The next big show of 1994 is King of the Ring. It's June 19th, 1994. We're going to talk about it in more detail in the future, but let's talk about Owen's involvement for now. He has been in a major match at Wrestlemania with Bret, and now he's going to win the King of the Ring without Brent's direct involvement. So you start to see the major push here. In the quarterfinals, he pins Tatanka after about 8 minutes. Tatanka goes for a sunset flip, but Hart doesn't go over and just falls on him for the pin. It's a good match that Meltzer gave 3 1/4 stars. In the semifinals, Owen defeats the 1-2-3 Kid by submission with the Sharpshooter after about 3.5 minutes. Meltzer says, this was about as good of a short match as you'll see. 3 1/4 stars. And then in the finals, of course, Owen pinned Razor Ramon after about 6.5 minutes with an elbow drop off the top after Neidhart had attacked Razor at ringside, hitting a clothesline and sending him into the steel ring post. Of course, now that he's the King of the Ring, they do the coronation ceremony, and he changes his nickname from the Rocket to the King of Harts. Owen and Razor got 2 stars on the match from Dave Meltzer. And this, to me, is a perfect angle and continuation of what happened at WrestleMania, in a way to just kind of continue this. So Bret may be the champ, but Owen is the King of the Ring. And it still has a little bit of prestige because Bret had just won it the year before. Whose idea was him winning the King of the Ring? Did you guys have to sell Vince on it? Was there any campaigning involved? Or was this kind of the plan all along with this storyline?
At this point, Owen was over with everybody. So I want to say it was Pat Patterson's original idea. And we came back with kind of whatever Bret can do, I can do better.
Right.
So monkey see, monkey do. And Owen went in, and I'm gonna do everything you did, Bret, but I'll be bigger and I'll be better. So it was natural to have Owen win King of the Ring and then christen himself the King of Harts.
Well, and at this point, obviously the stage is set now for SummerSlam. And before we get there, let's talk about a Superstars taping that you guys did in Pennsylvania on June 21st, 1994. This would air July 16th. And here we see the announcement that the world champion is going to defend his title against Owen Hart in a steel cage match at SummerSlam. And then the next day in Poughkeepsie, we see Bret defeat Owen in a steel cage match after Neidhart's interference backfires. So you guys start to run teasers at some of the TV tapings as dark matches just to build interest. And they continue to work all over the Horn, especially through Canada, through Ontario, Quebec, all over the territories. And they're drawing pretty good crowds, 12,248 in Montreal. They run the Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. So they're running some big arenas. Of course, they hit some smaller towns too. In Hull, Quebec, they only draw 1,100. And then we have a Monday Night Raw taping in Bushkill, Pennsylvania at the Fernwood Resort. This is July 1st, 1994. To give you an idea of where business is here, they're running a Raw taping in Pennsylvania, and there's only 1,600 folks there, and that's a sellout. So it's clearly a different time in the business. But on the card, Bret defeats Owen with a reverse roll-up. And this is the famous match between Bret Hart and the 1-2-3 Kid coming up next. And it's worth going out of your way to watch. The champ, Bret Hart, defeats the 1-2-3 Kid by submission with the Sharpshooter at around the 25-minute mark after the challenger 1-2-3 Kid missed a dive off the top rope. And prior to the match, Owen and Neidhart came out and climbed on the apron, but they were ejected. Hart originally won the match, but asked for the bout to continue since the challenger's foot was on the bottom rope during the cover. And after the bout, the two men embraced out of respect, and they have shown this on a lot of stuff. Raw Hits, the Best of Raw 15th Anniversary, the Best of Raw Seasons 1 and 2, one of the more famous matches of Bret Hart's career, and certainly the one that helped put the 1-2-3 Kid on the map. What do you remember thinking about that match in particular?
Just how underrated that Sean Waltman was. You know, Sean was, as 1-2-3 Kid in a lot of respects, kind of a glorified enhancement guy that had all the talent in the world, but he's 6'1". So he's not a small guy, but he didn't have a big bodybuilder physique, and the name Kid didn't help him much either, but he was usually he's cursed with being a great worker, and that he was the guy that used to have to go out there and get guys over. But putting him in there with Bret, the people bought it because of the way that he works and because of the way that Bret worked. Made it believable. Made it believable that the 1, 2, 3 could actually beat him. But I think Waltman's pretty underrated as far as that goes, and I think people don't always appreciate his in-ring work as much as they should, especially in the early days, because that sumbitch, he could go and he could hang with anybody and make it believable.
Yeah, a consistently underrated guy who, bell to bell, puts on as good of a performance as you'll ever see. And what's interesting to me, the reason I bring this up is because, you know, at the same time they're kind of making Owen Hart a main event here, Bret is also helping, you know, put the shine on an up-and-coming 1, 2, 3 kid who obviously went on to be a very big star in the business. But this is 4 days before Vince McMahon's steroid trial starts. So needless to say, man, there is a lot of stuff going on in the WWF. I found it interesting that on July 8th in the Meadowlands, the guys worked a 60-minute Iron Man match and finished 3 falls to 2, with the final fall being the Sharpshooter just before the 60-minute time limit. Bret gets the win over Owen. Whose idea would it have been to work 60-minute matches? Is that a Bret thing that he pushes for?
Probably a Pat Patterson thing. Pat really enjoyed those Iron Man matches. Probably Pat Patterson, because it was something that Pat enjoyed. He liked the 1 hour of matches and knew that those two guys could make an hour interesting and keep the crowd's attention.
Well, they did it again the next night, this time in Long Island, on July 9th. And then they go overseas. They're in the Philippines, they're in China, they're in Singapore, and then they're back working house shows through California, Ohio, and West Virginia. Still, Bret and Owen. And every now and again, working a 60-minute Iron Man match. And Bruce Hart is in Bret's corner for a lot of these matches. And I don't know, it just seems kind of weird given what we know, that he was originally the guy who wrote and pitched the angle, and now he's on Bret's side here. Do you remember Bruce being kind of salty about the fact that Owen got the spot that he had written for?
I think Bruce could be salty about anything. I don't really remember that he was necessarily salty. I think that he was happy for his brothers. I think that he probably would have preferred it be him. But at the same time, I think he was happy to have any position on the card and be involved in a main event deal.
Well, let's get to it. The 1, 2, 3 kid has a series of Owen Hart matches leading into SummerSlam. And eventually, on Monday Night Raw, August 15th, 1994, the 1, 2, 3 kid defeats Owen Hart by DQ after about 12 minutes when Neidhart clotheslines Kid as he has a half crab applied to Owen. After the match, of course, Owen applies the Sharpshooter to Kid until the officials pull him off. Also a match worth going out of your way to see. And a couple more Wrestling Challenge and Superstars taping, and it's time for the big one. SummerSlam 1994 in the United Center. We touched on this show briefly on our Undertaker episode, but the other match on the card that people were really interested in, and the one that went long, that did change the Undertaker main event, is the one we're going to talk about today. August 29th, 1994. It's a sellout, 19,500 paid, 23,000 folks in attendance. Meltzer said this: the brother versus brother feud, which they started dropping hints of back in November and shot the big angle of in January, started out strong at the house shows, and it was responsible for the company's best house show run in a few years during the late spring. But either the feud or the tour gimmick didn't have legs, as the result of these past 2 months have been the lowest level of house show business in the history of the company. Hart vs. Hart opened with a near match of the year caliber classic at Wrestlemania, but the house show matches in general, as far as quality, have to rank as huge letdowns considering both men's reputations. But while Bret Hart doesn't usually live up to his self-pronouncements of his own ability at the house shows, he almost always does at the pay-per-views. A match with his brother matches up with 2 of the 4 best workers, along with Sean Waltman and Shawn Michaels in the entire company, and the cage adds an element which will largely force both men to work a different match than WrestleMania. So, how far off base or how on the money is Meltzer with this, saying that it started off strong with house show business, the business dwindled a little bit, and maybe the matches on the house shows were a little bit of a letdown?
Well, the business dwindled just in general, and business dwindled for a variety of reasons. One being that we didn't have the money and we weren't doing the marketing that we had done in the past because of the steroid trial. But again, you'd make excuses all day long. The new gas station opened down the street. It dwindled. Business wasn't great. But I do have a huge bone of contention to sit there and again, he makes a comment that the matches suffered. The matches weren't good. How does he know that? How in the hell he didn't see all those matches, and you're getting a report, a second or third hand report from somebody that was at that event that for whatever reason didn't like it or what have you, and then makes these grandiose assumptions. And I just don't think that's fair, and I think that's bullshit. And it's just the way that he goes about, on Twitter. Anybody going to this show? Hey, I am Dave. I say the show was 3 stars. So he reports it as fact. The show was 3 stars. I wanted to know. I don't know. The matches that I saw those guys always deliver. I've never known Bret Hart to not go out and perform the very best that he could perform. And if he didn't get that crowd, he would get that crowd, I guess is my point. If it took 20 minutes or 40 minutes, he was going to get the crowd.
According to Meltzer, Bret worked this SummerSlam match with strep throat. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Meltzer writes, the manner in which this match was worked really put Owen over strong as a face until the post-match, which changed things because both men worked as equals and came off as having a never say die attitudes, which after 20 minutes made fans have respect for both. This probably won't win match of the year, but it beat their WrestleMania match, and I believe it'll be years before we see a cage match under these limiting circumstances that is this good. 5 stars. He could not put it over strong enough, and a lot of people thought that the WrestleMania match was better. Meltzer says, this is as good as it gets. 5 stars. I know you're kind of anti-Meltzer. Everybody who listens to this show knows that. But what do you think about this 5-star rating for this match? You've got to agree here. This was outstanding.
I thought both matches were outstanding, WrestleMania and SummerSlam. I thought they were both excellent.
Do you think that maybe the reason Bret Owen at WrestleMania 10 didn't get 5 stars is because Meltzer gave that distinction to Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon in the ladder match?
I have no idea why Meltzer does any of the things that he does, but I do think that the story that was told at WrestleMania was excellent, and both guys went out and told that story to perfection. And you came out of it feeling exactly how we wanted you to feel.
Well, it was phenomenal. If you haven't seen this match, go out of your way to watch it. And I want to put in perspective how rare it is for Meltzer to give the WWF or E 5-star matches. He gave Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon at WrestleMania 10 in the ladder match 1, and then later this year, of course, here at SummerSlam, Bret versus Owen in the cage. But it didn't happen again until 1997 at WrestleMania 13 with Bret and Austin. And I guess the last one of this era, so to speak, was the very first Hell in a Cell match from October of 1997 at In Your House Bad Blood with Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. So to say this match is pretty special is an understatement. What do you think made this match so phenomenal, besides the fact that they went way over and took all The Undertaker's time?
Feeling. It's one thing that I try to stress to young talent. They always ask me, do you have any advice? And the best advice I can give to someone is stop thinking and start feeling. When a talent goes out and they are so worried and thinking about what they think they have to do, and they're thinking about their next spot and what they have to say next and where they have to be next, you lose the spontaneity of the match. You lose the connection with the audience a lot of times. If you go out and you know and you believe your character and you believe what you're about to do and you know it like the back of your hand, you can go out, feel the audience, and take them on a ride. So I say all that to say that Bret and Owen didn't have to go out and have every single step of their match planned out. All they had to do was go out and feel that audience and feed off of the energy that audience gave them and be able to go into the match and have it be a classic because they weren't worried about what their next spot was going to be. They knew the story. They went with it. And that's the mark of two great professionals.
Post SummerSlam, Owen pulls Razor Ramon's card, and Razor is the IC champ here, and they have a series of matches. This is essentially a rematch of the King of the Ring finale, and they work a series of tag matches with Bret on the other team as well. Let's get to Survivor Series 94. This one's in San Antonio, Texas at the Freeman Coliseum. 10,000 folks there, 8,000 paid. It was announced as a sellout. Wink, wink. November 23rd, 1994. On that card, we see Bob Backlund defeat the world champion Bret Hart to win the title after 34 minutes. I'm sure we'll cover that at some point in the future. But essentially the story is the participants' seconds. So someone in their corner would have to throw in a towel to end the match. Stu and Helen Hart were shown ringside before the bout, and during the contest, Bret's wife Julie and their kids were shown watching from a balcony seat. And around the 25-minute mark, Smith was knocked out while chasing as an interfering Owen ran around the ring. Moments later, Owen appeared to cry as Bret was caught in the crossface chicken wing. Owen then pleaded with his parents sitting at ringside to stop the match, or Bret's arm would be broken. Owen eventually opened the barricade with Stu and Helen standing ringside for several more minutes before Helen threw in the towel to end the match. And right after the match ended, Owen slid in the ring, held up Bret's towel in celebration, and ran backstage, revealing that all of this emotion for his brother's concern for his health was fake. And a few minutes later, of course, Bret was helped backstage by his parents and Pat Patterson and other officials, and Backlund is awarded the title. Pettengill then conducts a backstage interview again with Owen, who said it was the greatest Thanksgiving of his life because Bret was no longer champion. And Owen said that he would go on to be the tag team, intercontinental, and world champion. And unlike Bret, he would never surrender. And they keep going and working the house shows through March of 1995. What do you remember of this angle? This is pretty well done. I can't wait to cover this show in long form. Backlund getting the win over Bret Hart, I thought was done really well. Chat me up. What'd you think about Survivor Series 94?
Well, again, it goes back to the classic family dynamic and the youngest son pleading with his mom and feigning empathy or sympathy for his big brother. And I've come to my senses and only you can stop this. I just thought that everything that Owen did in that vein was off the chart. He could take something very small and you would give him an idea and he just would look at you and I've got it. He knew exactly what the feeling was. And I used to get in his head just in general about family dynamics. And Owen and I did used to laugh about that because, again, him being the baby, he was picked on his entire life by his older brothers and sisters. They all picked on him. Now, they protected him too, but they also picked on him and had fun. So he was the brunt of a lot of jokes and always picked on as he got older. But he could relate to that feeling of, fuck you, big brother. Mom always liked you best.
All right, so the next pay-per-view is Royal Rumble 1995, and on here we have Diesel, who's now the champion, challenging Bret Hart. Ultimately, Owen is involved here. That sets up more matches with Owen and Bret before finally Bret, the babyface, gets the victory, and this feud is over. So what does Owen do when he's finished up here? Well, he rebounds from the loss to Bret by winning the Tag Team Championship and he defeats the Smoking Guns. And this happens at WrestleMania 11. And Owen was supposed to be joined by a mystery partner, and he challenges the Smoking Guns to a title match. And the mystery partner turns out to be Yokozuna. Meltzer gave the match 2 stars. There were rumors at the time as to who this mystery partner was going to be. On the Heart of Gold DVD, Edge says, teaming with Yokozuna on paper, that makes no sense whatsoever, but it worked. And the team is built around the fact that in the angle, Yoko has beaten Bret for the title. And this is a part of a shift to the tag team scene here in the company. For years, the company had favored real teams, whatever that means. Things like Demolition, the Hart Foundation, Money Incorporated, the Steiner Brothers. And now it's Yokozuna and Owen Hart, 2 single stars put together. And Owen's kind of doing what he said he would do here. He was going to run the gauntlet, collecting the gold. What were you guys thinking here? Was Yokozuna always the plan? Who raises their hand and said, what about this?
Well, Yoko was the plan because he was somebody that had defeated Bret. And he was a former WWF champion. It was somebody that Owen could kind of rub in Bret's face. And add on to that, we needed something new for Yoko. So it was a way for Yoko not to have to be out there and putting a bunch of wear and tear on his body. And it was kind of a respite for both of these guys to just change it up for a little while.
After this match, Brent and Owen are still doing house show matches for the European tour and WrestleMania. And he continues to team, he being Owen, continues to team with Yoko through the summer of 95. And they have a series of matches here against Luger and Davey Boy Smith. And this is where we've heard one of the more famous ribs that Owen pulled on Luger and Davey Boy. Do you have some details on that you could share?
Oh, I know I don't. Tell me, what was it? I might have. You got to refresh my memory.
So he would deadweight.
I'm sick.
He would deadweight one guy, and then go up light as a feather for another guy as they're doing press slams. So Owen would be a bumping machine for one guy and make him feel like he's Hercules, but then for the other guy, take your pills, old man. He would sandbag the shit out of, and it would just infuriate Lex Luger. Like, why can't I get him up? I don't understand. You don't recall this?
Maybe.
All right, we're trying to be entertaining here.
Yes,
I know
definitely.
You're having
Yeah, no, Owen had, it's anything that could frustrate people. And that, like I said, that was a rib that Owen would do that would just kind of, you couldn't tell it as an audience member, but the guys in the ring and obviously Lex would get very frustrated because, you know, Davey Boy would go and Davey would go, oh, you need to fall, maybe you need to work out a little more. Maybe you'll fall behind the neck. Fuck, Lex, you're getting weak. Fuck, I got no problem getting him up. So yeah, it was. Owen loved to have fun like that. I guarantee you, if Perfect hadn't done the one tassel off of Lex's shit, Owen would have found other ways to irritate Lex. If you sold for Owen, you got it.
Chat me up about a thing that Owen used to do in house shows. He never did it on TV, but he would take popcorn from a fan and use it as a foreign object.
Owen would take the most ridiculous thing. You know, in the old days, remember when the heel would go into his trunks for a gimmick and it would usually appear to be a white oblong object and hit the baby face with it. You know, a lot of times that was nothing more than a paper cup taped up, you know, with tape. So, sorry, folks. I know. Just ruined many childhoods right there. But the premise behind it was, yeah, he would take popcorn and hit them, and guys would sell it, or he would use a cup, or just the more ridiculous, the better. Or like he used foam fingers and shit too. Just anything that would be ridiculous. Kind of just to have fun, to crack the boys up from time to time.
Is there one fruit or vegetable that the Undertaker hates most of all? And if so, could you share a rib about Owen Hart and the Undertaker?
Cucumbers. Yeah. And there were several. He used to put cucumbers around it, but I remember, I think the one you're talking about, the one I remember is when in Taker's iced tea, Owen put cucumbers at the bottom of the iced tea so that when Taker drank the tea and drank it back, he didn't realize the cucumbers were in there until he was looking at it in his face. Yeah, Take doesn't like cucumbers. He didn't like that very much.
The story I heard is
mine is pickles and Taker's is cucumbers.
Well, that makes sense because you're older.
So mine, the pickling,
yes,
has the effect on me? Okay,
yes.
Got it. Understood.
The story I heard about cucumbers is there's a series of house shows, and for whatever reason, it's a tag match with Undertaker on one side and Owen on the other. And at some point when they're working together, Owen gets him, they're doing some mat work. He's got him down on the mat. He's got all of his weight on Undertaker, working like a headlock. He reaches into his tights and pulls out a handful of cucumbers and puts them in Undertaker's face and just holds them there while the Undertaker is trying so desperately to get out of there, but he doesn't want to break character. So the Undertaker takes his gimmick very seriously and does not want to break kayfabe, so to speak, and admit that he is scared of a fucking fruit or vegetable. But he loses his mind right there and jumps out and is apparently not very happy with Mr. Owen Hart.
I could kind of confirm that. I wasn't there, but yes, I kind of heard about that. Yeah. But the other good one was, yeah, he did that. But it was always fun to place cucumbers in odd places for Taker. Just like a cucumber on top of his bag would freak him out.
I was told that Owen also cut up cucumbers and put them in Undertaker's boots, and he didn't know because he wears a sock, of course. He puts his foot in there, gets going, it squishes. He takes it out and realizes there's a squished cucumber all in the boots. He did this to Undertaker's hats.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So he had a lot of fun at the Undertaker's expense, and seemingly the Undertaker, while he may have been irritated, knew that these were good-natured ribs, and it's not like flushing somebody's passport down a toilet or some shit like that, right?
No, I don't think Owen did that.
I don't think anybody says they did. So, Owen and Yoko defend the title for 5 months until they lose the belts to Shawn Michaels and Diesel at In Your House 3, September 24th, 1995. So while Owen and Yoko are putting up their tag titles, Diesel and Shawn put up their singles belts, the world title and the Intercontinental Championship. Owen doesn't show up though, so the British Bulldog steps in as Yoko's partner. However, during the match, Owen runs down to the ring only to be pinned, despite not actually being in the match. What was the thinking here? Was this storyline, or did he have an issue and he wasn't able to go? Do you recall?
No, it was storyline, but it was also, you talk about crazy shit that happens sometimes. As I explained in our Wrestlemania 6 story, or Ultimate Warrior, or whatever, when we talked about title versus title, champion versus champion, title versus title. Vince's rationale: it's not title versus title, it's champion versus champion. He didn't get all the championships on the line.
Because it's done.
Why would Shawn and Diesel want to be tag team champions? Well, why wouldn't they be? And why wouldn't Owen and Yoko want to be why wouldn't they want to be champions? They can't hold them both at the same time. But the idea was to get all the championships on Shawn and Diesel. And that was the original intent. It was just a different creative way to do it. Have Owen go out there.
So the next night during the controversy, the belts are put back on Hart and Yokozuna. And eventually, of course, the Smoking Guns defeat Hart and Yoko, and they become the champs. And it's during this time period where Davey Boy turns heel and joins Owen and Yoko with Jim Cornette. So Davey and Owen are teaming together by the end of 1995. For Martha's book, regarding Owen finally achieved a level of security in 96. The deal on the table was 5 years at $250,000 a year. It also included approximately $50,000 annually in merchandising. What Owen really wanted to do was sign for 2 years and then retire from wrestling altogether. Do you recall Owen ever saying that he would have liked to retire in 1998?
I don't recall that, no. I remember Owen being happy with the deal.
During the summer of 96, the two brothers-in-law start to team up more and more, talking about Davey Boy and Owen, and sometimes they have Vader in tow, who's also a member of Camp Cornette. This feels a little bit like hodgepodge. Hypothetically speaking, how would Cornette describe Owen Hart?
Goddamn little motherfucker. Ribbon son of a bitch. Ooh, I can do this one. It doesn't hurt. I think Corny, man, I think he dug Owen. He was always on guard. I'll tell you a great Owen Hart rib. Well, and it wasn't even a rib. The rib ended up being on me, and I think I've told the story before about we were in the middle of an angle with Diana Hart, and Owen was on the phone in the dressing room with Stu. And Jim Cornette came in, and Stu was upset over how we were using Diana, and was talking to Owen about it. And when he came in, he says, "Well, here's Jim Cornette." So he puts Cornette on the phone. Well, Cornette thinks it's me doing Stu. So Cornette goes on a rant about, "Well, goddamn, Stu, I tell you, your fucking whore daughter, we're going to take her, and Sean's going to fuck her in the ass live on TV, and it's all that pervert Bruce Prichard's idea, and he's going to do this, and he's going to do..." And I mean, he's just going off. I walk in the room. Cornette looks at me, looks at Owen and Davey Boy, who are both sitting there, who are like, have a look of astonishment on their face, and hands me the phone and says, "Well, Bruce Prichard's right here," and gives me the phone. And I'm like, "Who is it?" I go, "It's Stu." So I get on the phone with Stu, who wants to fucking kill me. "Yeah, you fucking pervert. You want to do what to my daughter, I tell you." And so, yeah, that was a classic rib turned on me that wasn't even a rib, that, just kind of happens when Owen's around.
Wrestlemania 12, the trio we just talked about from Camp Cornette, Vader, Owen, and Bulldog, defeat Ahmed Johnson, Jake Roberts, and Yokozuna in a six-man that goes about 13 minutes. Anything you'd like to mention about that Wrestlemania 12 match in particular?
No, not necessarily. That was kind of a forgettable one.
Owen's a color commentator for the 96 King of the Ring, and he's obviously going to have a lot of partisan support for both Vader and Davey Boy. And during this time, he wore a cast on his right forearm for several months, feigning a nagging injury to subsequently use his cast as a weapon during his matches, similar to Orton back in the old mid-'80s with Piper. And there is even a kind of fun little nugget on the WWE Network when they went on an international tour. Bret was not with the company at the time, but he had agreed to do this match. He takes on Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Owen is doing commentary with Jim Ross. It really shows you another side of Owen that I found very fun. It's on the WWE Network if you'd like to check it out. In Your House Mind Games is in September of 1996 in Philadelphia. Leading to this show, the Smoking Guns are the tag champs, and Owen and Bulldog earn a shot at Mind Games, which is In Your House 10. And on this show, Owen and Bulldog leave as the champs, and they also leave with a new manager, Clarence Mason. He has conned Jim Cornette into signing champions. Do you have a Clarence Mason impression, Bruce?
I don't, but it's funny, as a lawyer, Clarence Mason got most of his stuff from Jim Cornette, who would feed him just all kinds of lines and gibberish, which was some of the funniest shit you ever wanted to hear was Jim Cornette doing Clarence Mason. But Clarence was a real lawyer. And you know what? If you need any legal help, you can go to RGT4law.com. No matter what legal needs you may need, they're real lawyers and they're real good too.
Did you know there are billions of dollars set aside for asbestos victims and their families? If you or a loved one has been affected by mesothelioma or an asbestos-related cancer, you can call 855-748-4529 for a free consultation. That's 855-748-4529. Or visit rgtforlaw.com for more information. Robert Taylor, R.G. Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
All right, so Owen and Bulldog are tag champs, and they have a pretty lengthy run. It goes 246 days until May 26, 1997. They eventually lose the tag team titles too. Do you remember, Bruce?
The Headbangers?
Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels. So quite a run for them. They carry these belts through WrestleMania 13, which is available on our archives. Of course, WrestleMania is preceded by the Royal Rumble, also available in the archives. If you'd like to hear about Bret and Owen and Davey Boy and the whole Hart family, you can kind of trace that through our archives. 1997, though, is where we start to see a little bit of dissension between Owen Hart and the Bulldog. It starts at the Royal Rumble, where Hart accidentally eliminates Bulldog. And then after the Rumble, they have a miscommunication against Furnace and LaFawn, and Bulldog eventually fires Mason after losing a match to Crush, who was also managed by Mason, something that did not sit well with Owen. Another bone of contention is that there is a newly created WWF European Championship, and you guys did a international taping. I believe it was in Germany, and this aired preempting you guys, whether it was Tennis or the Dog Show or something like that. And you guys did a really cool Raw special, and it featured a match between these two guys who are tag team champions, which I think is fun, and family members, Owen and Davey Boy, in the finals to crown a brand new European champion. Carry me through the creation of this title, why you guys decided to introduce it here, and how it comes down to Davey Boy and Owen.
Well, working backwards, the idea behind it was to crown Davey Boy as the first European champion, and the backstory going all the way back to Owen and Bret. And Bret, I can do everything you can do. I can do it better. And trying to recapture a little bit of that Bret Davey Boy magic from 1992 at Wembley Stadium. So it was that simple. We knew that Davey and Owen would have a great match, and Owen could sell anything. So we just started planting those seeds and allowed them to tell their story. Owen was a personality there.
It's interesting to note amongst the belt marks that this is one of the first times you guys used Joe Marshall to make a belt. It might actually be the first belt he made for the company. J-Mar is the nickname a lot of belt marks may be familiar with. We just talked earlier about Reggie Parks, and he had kind of been the mainstay for making belts for the WWF for years and years and years. Do you remember how J-Mar got this gig with the company?
Well, J.J. Dillon was in charge of that at the time. It was simply we put it out to bid. And Reggie was taking a little longer than normal to repair belts, to get belts made when we wanted new ones, and they were getting pricier and pricier. Every time we would order a belt, it would be more money. So we put it out to bid. And lo and behold, J-Mar won that bid. We did the European Championship, the Intercontinental Championship, and maybe the Tag Team Championships all in that same run.
And,
that's right.
And then, of course, the world title, too, would be replaced not too long after that. I think it was the night after WrestleMania 14, they debuted the new Big Eagle belt that they nicknamed it on a blue strap with Vince McMahon presenting his new title to his new champion, Stone Cold Steve Austin. So there's a little bit of love for you belt marks out there who may be interested in all things belt. Eventually, the Hart family get back together for the new Hart Foundation, and I'm sure we're going to do this in long form one day. This is essentially an anti-American stable, and it's going to include not just Bret, not just Owen and Davey Boy and Jim Neidhart, but also Brian Pillman. And if you haven't already, this is something worth checking out. 1997 is one of my favorite years, and this is one of the reasons why. The catalyst to bring the Hart Foundation back together, of course, is Bret Hart's match against Steve Austin at Wrestlemania 13, available in our archives, covered in depth and in great detail. The point of this is Bret is now a heel, but only in the United States. He's a babyface across the border. In planning Bret's heel turn here, how far ahead did you guys look as far as bringing in the Hart Foundation as a heel faction? Was that always in the plans, or how does that come about?
It kind of just happened. And when we were originally going to put Bret and Owen and Bulldog together, Stu then made the pitch for Neidhart. So it's like, okay, well, we can bring Neidhart back in. And Pillman was just a natural. He fit in there, and he had history in Calgary. So we got two Canadians, a Brit, and two Americans that are all anti-American. And they're all citizens of the United States. Except Bulldog. I guess Bulldog's the only one that wasn't.
A week after that match, on the March 31st, 1997 Raw, Owen and Davey have a match with their family watching on, and the tag champions break up, and then Bret comes to the ring and gives rebirth to the Hart Foundation. And the anti-American Hart Foundation, as we said, includes Neidhart and Brian Pillman. About a month later, they are in Omaha, Nebraska, April 28th. That's a sold-out crowd of 6,600 folks, and Owen defeats Rocky Maivia with a leg backslide after about 8 minutes to become the Intercontinental Champion. So at this point, the Harts are dominating right now, and especially in the hardware department, since this is a decent amount of time removed from Bret and Owen headlining WrestleMania and SummerSlam, it feels like a resurgence for the Hart family. How does this come about where you guys kind of go front and center after they had seemingly cooled off? Bret had not been in the main event spot at WrestleMania, and now he's back front and center with the heel faction. Is this just a no-brainer at this point because of how the angle caught fire to just roll with it?
Essentially. And the funny thing about it is, we didn't expect, we obviously did not call and or expect the division between the Canadian audience and the American audience at all. We planned on the Hart Foundation being heels, but we had a lot of dates in Canada, and we had a lot of TV, and we had the Calgary pay-per-view and different things planned. And that Canadian audience just embraced the whole Hart Foundation. So that just got created under our nose, and we capitalized on it, because you cannot ignore when the crowd is cheering like crazy for your top heels and booing the living shit out of your top baby faces. So you've got to call it. You've got to say, well, hey, the folks here in Canada, they love their local hometown heroes. And you speak bad about the Hart Foundation, you're speaking bad about Canada. And we just had to play it that way because the Canadian audience made us.
In Your House 14, right after WrestleMania 13, was Revenge of the Taker. And on that card, we see the Road Warriors, the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal win a match against Owen and Davey, but they do not have a title change there. It was a DQ. The next month, we get A Cold Day in Hell, and Owen and Bulldog are again working LOD, this time in a dark match after the pay-per-view is over. King of the Ring 1997 is a show where we see the Hart Foundation of Owen, Bulldog, and Neidhart taking on Sid and the Legion of Doom. Any memories about any of those matches you'd like to mention before we talk about In Your House 16 Canadian Stampede?
No, it was just simply a build. It was just simply that slow build of the Hart Foundation and getting them into a spot where Vince was in his faction mode, where he thought that everybody needed to have a group to attach themselves to. And that was our big faction. We had the American faction led by Stone Cold Steve Austin and the Patriot and all those guys. So it was just simply building those factions as we went along.
So Canadian Stampede is one of the better shows you guys did in 1997. It actually won Best Major Show in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. It took place July 6, 1997 at the Saddle Dome in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The undercard is what it is, but the main event is what everybody's here to see. It's the Hart Foundation, Bret, Neidhart, Owen, Bulldog, and Pillman taking on Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ken Shamrock, Goldust, and the Legion of Doom. On a scale of 1 to 10, how great was this crowd for this match?
On fire. They were about a 35. Man, they were on fire from the minute that the door, before the doors opened. At Stampede earlier that day, it was as if the Calgary Stampede, which is this huge event that takes place in Calgary on a yearly basis, it was as if the Calgary Stampede was, those people were only there for the WWF and for the Hart Foundation. It was a Hart Foundation Appreciation Day. I mean, it was landing in Calgary with the customs people and the fans at the airport. It was the WrestleMania atmosphere. They were just so into it, and they were getting a big pay-per-view in their hometown, and they came out in force. But the atmosphere that entire weekend was insane.
If you haven't seen that match, you should go out of your way. It's In Your House Canadian Stampede, July 1997. It's on the network. It is phenomenal. The main event especially. So let's kind of set the stage, so to speak. Owens in a pretty damn featured spot here. He did lose the tag titles, but he lost it to Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin, and he beat The Rock for the Intercontinental title. Now, this is before he was The Rock, but still, that shit counts. Quite a run here. And now we're in a pretty featured match where he's taking on the challenger, the upstart, the man who's got the hot hand, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And this is a singles match for the Intercontinental title where if Steve Austin loses the match, he has to kiss Owen Hart's ass. And this is, of course, the Summerslam 1997 match that took place at the East Rutherford, New Jersey Continental Airlines Arena. 20,000 folks are there. It's August 3rd. One of my more favorite SummerSlams. I think it's one of the most underrated. But of course, what everybody wants to hear about here is the unfortunate accident that happens. Of course, Austin is white hot. His feud with Bret has now transitioned to a feud with Owen. Austin and Bret kept their feud going through the spring and the summer. Bret had to take a timeout with a leg injury. That's where the thing started to really heat up backstage between Shawn and Bret. And they want to keep Austin hot, so they program him with Owen. And this leads right into this now, I guess, infamous match. You can go watch it on the network right now. It's about an hour and 56 minutes into the show. And it's pretty clear what happens, how it happens, when it happens. And you know what you're watching. It is kind of difficult to watch because Owen seems very concerned when he has Austin's head too low for a modified tombstone pile driver. Now, if you've ever seen The Undertaker do a tombstone, he goes down to his knees. Owen sits out and Austin's head is exposed and Austin's hands aren't really moving right after the impact. And people are worried in a big way. This is ugly to even talk about because it seems ridiculous, but I got lots of questions about people saying Owen did this on purpose because he didn't like Steve Austin at the time. And Martha Hart in her book writes, it was suggested Owen placed Austin's head too low before dropping him. As a result, Austin was left lying on the canvas, claiming to be temporarily paralyzed. A lot of people took issue with the way Martha worded that. And there are lots of people who have suggested that Austin faked the injury to get time off. I can't believe we're even talking about it this way, because very real injuries happen in professional wrestling. Set the record straight here. What happened? Was there any heat from the office? How did Stone Cold feel? There's lots of rumor and innuendo that he doesn't feel like he got a proper apology or heads up from Owen, and it led to hurt feelings for a long time. You were there. What really happened?
Well, the previous comments were absolutely stupid by people that think that Owen would intentionally hurt anyone in a match. It's also stupid to think that Steve Austin would fake an injury, especially of that nature. And let's say hypothetically, if Steve faked it, goddamn, he's one of the greatest actors I've ever seen, to be able to do that involuntary whole hand deal that he did. No, it was a tragic accident, is exactly what it was. And accidents happen in the wrestling business. They happen, unfortunately, every day. And this happened to the guy that was on his way to being the biggest star that the business had ever seen. So it was just an unfortunate, tragic deal. But when it happened and Steve hit and he was down, unfortunately for those of us who have seen it happen before, there are certain things that you look for. You look for stiffness in the body. You look for the toes moving, the feet to move. You look for movement in the hands. And Steve's hands were up by his chest, and he wasn't moving. And it was a really, really scary moment. And Owen knew it when he went to cover him and went down, and the referee knew it, and Steve just kept fighting. But yeah, Steve was temporarily paralyzed there for a while. I mean, he had no feeling. He had no control. I guess you would classify it as a stinger, but it was a lot more than a stinger, because he was down and he was out and had no control for longer than a few seconds. So it was scary as shit backstage. It was scary as shit in the ring. Steve wasn't happy after the fact. He wasn't happy, that night. He wasn't happy the next few days, because all of a sudden his career went from being on a trajectory to an unknown status, because he's going to different doctors, looking at his neck and getting all these different opinions. So it was a case of not knowing.
Right.
As far as Owen apologizing and all that, I'm not going to speak for Steve or Owen. I don't know what happened there. I do know Steve was upset after the fact, as I think anybody would be that has natural human emotions. So, but the thought or even the suggestion that Owen would do something like that intentionally is so off base, so wrong, that I can't even believe that I'm dignifying it with an answer.
So, do you mean to tell me that you never discussed whether or not Austin was hot or had hurt feelings or upset or about any of this with Owen?
I said he was hot. He was hot after the fact. He was hot for days and weeks after the fact, not knowing what the hell his future was. I never sat down and said, "Hey, Steve, did Owen Hart come and apologize to you? Are you okay with him?" Never had that discussion with him. But I did, about, obviously, because he let everybody know it. He was not happy. He was pissed off, not knowing what the hell, because we're trying to plan for the future. And we don't know who we've got at this point, because Steve's got a bad neck injury that has to be looked at. And everybody's got their favorite experts.
Right.
So it took a little bit of time. So during that time, I'm sure that he seethed, but I can't tell you what they did between the two of them. You'd have to ask Steve that one. But yeah, he was pissed. A lot of people were pissed because it screwed up plans, and you're pissed any time that one of your top guys gets hurt in a bad way.
Yeah, and you guys tried to do what you could for Austin, which we'll cover in the future, but he had lots of angles where he would start to stun officials, and this, of course, leads to him stunning Slaughter and McMahon and lots of other stuff. Since he can't work a match, he can still be featured prominently on the show, get arrested on the show, things like that. But you guys continue this Owen piece of business right away, seemingly. Things just keep moving forward, but in true Vince fashion or pro wrestling fashion, you guys make an angle out of the injury with Owen, and he has a shirt that mocks Austin 316, which says, of course, I just whipped your ass. Well, Owen 316 says, I just broke your neck. Remember any heat about that, or is that just natural, old-fashioned, classic wrestling to Austin?
Well, that's natural, old-fashioned wrestling, and you've got a situation, you can either completely ignore it or capitalize on it. And not knowing what you have and hoping for the best. Hey, we didn't know what we had with Steve building up with all that shit with Steve. We just knew that we wanted to keep him on TV in case we got a best case scenario out of the doctors. We had no clue, but we knew we had a star. We knew we needed television to be out there and keep him involved in the television program. But as far as Owen, and you got to capitalize on it.
Do you think somebody has a conversation, whether it's Owen or Vince or somebody comes to Austin and says, hey, we've come up with this t-shirt idea? Or does he give him a heads up, or he just turns on TV one day in Austin?
I would bet that either Vince or Jim Ross or somebody had a conversation with Steve about it.
Do you remember who came up with Owen 316?
I don't know. I really don't know. It might have been Vince Russo because he was involved at that time.
So let's fast forward. In Your House, Bad Blood. This one takes place in St. Louis, Missouri. It's the show where Brian Pillman is announced as being deceased. That is available in our archives under the Brian Pillman episode. They have a new attendance record here for 21,000 and change. It's a sellout, over 17,000 paid. So business is certainly on the uptick here. And of course, due to the injury, Stone Cold has to forfeit his newly won Intercontinental title that he won at SummerSlam from the match we're talking about where he was injured by Owen. And now there's a new tournament to determine the new champion. And in the finals, it's Farouk and Owen Hart. This time, though, Steve Austin interferes on behalf of Owen to make sure that Owen wins so Austin can win it back in a rematch of their SummerSlam match. I thought it was pretty smart booking. And after the match, Austin explains that he wants to beat Hart for the title again when he returns. And he would not allow Farouk or anyone else to beat him. Do you remember this particular angle? This seems like pretty smart booking here, and obviously these guys don't have a problem working together if they're doing this so quickly after the injury.
No, they're both professionals, and you've got to, both Steve Austin and Owen Hart I would trust my body with. So, yeah, they're professionals, and they move on, and you get pissed off at, like I said, you get pissed off at your loved ones, so you're going to get pissed off at people you work with from time to time, too. But what I loved about it was the character development with Steve. I ain't gonna let you I can't do him. I ain't gonna let you beat him because I'm gonna be the one to beat him. And it just led to Steve's character development so much more. And I loved it.
Well, and one of the things that was happening a lot in wrestling at the time was, this explosion of t-shirts that really happened with the NWO and then Austin 316. And so you've got two sides where the t-shirts are selling really hot. Do you remember how hot of a seller that Owen 316 shirt was?
In Canada, it did real well. I don't know how well it did domestically.
Well, I'll tell you what, t-shirts are hotter than ever over at BrucePrichard.com. Am I right?
Hell yeah, man. We've got them all. We've got, ribs 24/7 if you're into that kind of thing. And don't forget, this, I think, has become my new favorite. Dave. Don't ask me why. Maybe it's because I used to be over, and well, you know. And if you're hungry, Conrad, hell, we got chicken salad recipe. We have ribs galore, rib 'em. And another one of my all-time favorites is Moyab. You know what I mean?
I do.
Well, you can get them all over there at BrucePrichard.com. Even talking about this, I wrote this shit. So it's all right there for you. And I even got Dr. Tom covered. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, there's a whole selection of Dr. Tom Prichard shirts. If you're a Conrad Thompson guy, then show it. We've got I'm a Conrad Thompson guy shirt for you. And we've got a special Alabama shirt coming up here very shortly. Did you like that one?
I did like that one, and you're going to like it too. Cruise on over to BrucePrichard.com. Let's talk about Survivor Series 1997. This is, of course, famous for the Montreal Screwjob. There's lots of rumor and innuendo as to what really happened here. And you can break it all down. It's in the archives right now if you'd like to. Just go check it out. It's the Montreal Screwjob is the title of the episode. It took place on November 9th, 1997. In this show, Austin gets his revenge against Owen, where he pins the Intercontinental Champion with a stunner after about 4 minutes. Prior to the match, Hart was escorted to the ring by Davey Boy, Jim Neidhart, Furnace, and LaFawn. And, of course, Austin hits the stunner on Neidhart, wins the match with the stunner on Owen. The natural order of things is back to where it belongs. We'll leave the screw job where it is. But for those of you who haven't heard it before, why did Neidhart and Davey Boy get their release, but Owen did not?
Well, Owen and, Davey Boy and Neidhart asked for their releases, and Vince offered it up to everybody, and he really wanted to keep Owen, but he also offered Owen a new contract as well, and wanted Owen to stay, made a play for him, and Owen decided to stay. It's as simple as that. It's no different than, I don't think that Vince really wanted to fight for Neidhart or Davey Boy, either one. They thought the grass was greener on the other side, as did Bret. And losing them wasn't, I hate to say it wasn't a big deal, but it wasn't as big of a deal. And he didn't want to lose Owen. So he made Owen a counter offer and said, hey, if you'd like to go, go, but I'd like for you to stay, and here's what I'm going to offer you. And it's that simple. But I think Owen really wanted to show what he could do on his own. And I think that was at the base of why he stayed.
In her book, Martha Hart wrote, Owen soon asked Vince for his outright release. He figured he'd be able to join Bret in WCW, willing to forego a contract that was to pay close to $300,000 US each of the next 3 years. Owen felt simply he could no longer work for a man he couldn't trust. However, McMahon refused. Meltzer wrote, Vince McMahon wasn't going to let him out of his contract. Feeling with Bret gone, Owen would be more valuable as a babyface than ever before. It was inevitable that he would return, have a big money feud with Shawn Michaels, and probably be a bigger star than before. So this was clearly always the plan. And the Monday Night Wars aside, it seems like the Hart Foundation was riding high and strong, and now they're just over. So you were here kind of increative at the time. Doesn't this really throw a monkey wrench into how things are going to moving forward?
Sure. Without a doubt it did. But you just got, you've got to pick up your pieces and move forward. Shit happens sometimes. And you just got to go forward.
In Your House, D-Generation X was the next pay-per-view, and Ken Shamrock is with Shawn Michaels in the main event. But would you guys have preferred to have seen Owen Hart in that spot?
Yes. I'll tell you something that this is a bit of like inside little scoop. You remember when Owen came back Shawn Michaels was in the ring, and Owen came back to attack Shawn. And we had a very strict, no blood policy. Owen, before he went out to attack Shawn, had sliced open his fingers so that when he attacked Shawn and he grabbed Shawn's face like he was trying to take Shawn's eye out, that you would see blood all over Shawn's face. Now, nobody bladed. Well, I guess Owen did because he cut his fingers. But that was something, I came back and I was like, where's the blood? Where's the blood? What? And Owen says, oh, no. I did that. I cut my fingers so that you would see blood, and so that when I went after Shawn, you would see blood on his head. And I just thought that was absolute genius on Owen's part. But it was during that whole little time that we got the Nugget chant, where Shawn explained about taking a shit and you go to flush and there's always that one little nugget that floats back up to the top. And Nugget was born. I almost brought that up when you talked about a nugget of information a minute ago, but it's crazy how things get a life of their own off of Vince taking a shit and having nuggets float.
So there you go. There's how the Shawn Michaels promo of calling Owen a nugget happens. Owen is back facing the artist formerly known as Goldust in January of 1998 on Raw. And after the bout, the world champion Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna appear on the Titantron, and they are proud of getting Hunter out of his title defense here because Goldust is filling in for Hunter, who is the European champion at the time. And then Slaughter comes out and says that Owen's victory over Triple H's stand-in would constitute the title changing hands. And of course, upon announcement of that, Triple H starts freaking out and throwing chairs, saying he's going to get his payback. And Shawn finally gets in the ring against Owen on February 21st, 1998. It happens in Toronto in front of roughly 13,000 fans. The main event is the European champion Owen Hart taking on the world champion Shawn Michaels. There was never any concern about these guys being able to do business because that wasn't Owen's reputation. Am I right?
Absolutely. Both guys were professional, and there was no beef there. Beef was with Bret.
Triple H defeats the European champion Owen Hart to win the title in an impromptu match at the 52-second mark, when the referee, Tim White, stopped the match as Hart was in a leg lock after Chyna came to ringside and hit Hart in his injured ankle with a baseball bat. Before the match, Triple H came out and confronted Hart at the commentary table, saying that Hart was hiding behind Jim Ross and an injured ankle. And then Hart said he would see Triple H at WrestleMania, but Triple H shoved him to the floor, and then brawling with Triple H on the floor before the bout began. Hart was wearing an air casket on his injured ankle for the match. Do you remember how this injury came about?
I don't. I remember the injury, and I remember the match, actually, with the whole injury angle. I don't remember how the hell he hurt it.
They do wrestle at WrestleMania 14. This one's in Boston, Mass, at the Fleet Center, March 29th. Triple H and Owen go about 11 and a half minutes. Triple H wins with the pedigree after a low blow from Chyna. And the Commissioner Slaughter had himself handcuffed to Chyna during the duration of the title match. But of course, late in the contest, Chyna still finds a way to become involved, throwing powder in Slaughter's face and then interfering behind the referee's back. Monday Night Raw, Chattanooga, Tennessee, May 19th. I found this one interesting. The NWA World Champion, Dan Severn, defeats Owen Hart by disqualification. Do you remember how this comes about? It feels like a little bit of an odd pairing. I know Owen can get a great match out of anybody, but now all of a sudden we've got an NWA World Champion on Raw.
Well, unfortunately, that's it. The curse of the great worker. And Owen could get a great match out of everybody, so Owen was put in that position to get a match out of Dan and put him over because he could do it without hurting himself.
Not too long after this, in Rockford, Illinois, on a Monday Night Raw, there's a King of the Ring qualifying match. Dan Severn defeats D'Lo Brown by submission. And after the bout, Owen Hart attacks Dan Severn until Ken Shamrock chases him into the crowd. Due to the injury sustained in the hold, D'Lo would wear a chest protector for the next several months. So if you wondered where that came from, June 2nd, 1988. This leads to a series of matches with Ken Shamrock, which I'm excited to talk about in a minute. But first, they're all over the place and to varying crowds. 98 was obviously when it was on an upswing, but it wasn't huge all the time. Hammond, Indiana only drew 3,500 folks. But New York City at Madison Square Garden would sell out 19,500. They would draw big crowds at the Compaq Center in Houston, and even bigger crowds in Phoenix, Arizona at the American West Arena that July. But July 26th is what we really want to talk about. Fully loaded 1998, Fresno, California. And of course, everybody's going to remember this one. Owen Hart takes on Ken Shamrock in a dungeon match. And Owen wins in about 5 minutes with a crossface after using a hand weight as a weapon. Dan Severn was the special referee, and the bout took place in the Stu Hart dungeon in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. What do you remember about this?
God, there was so much talk back in the day about the dungeon. The guys talked about it on promos and everything, that it had this legendary status of what the dungeon was. And as you saw on that, the dungeon was just that, kind of a dungeon, an old dingy basement with a few weights in it where Stu used to stretch people. But we took that mystique and sent a crew up there. I cannot even remember who the hell the wrestling agent was that put that match together. But the guys went up, and I didn't go.
When was this filmed? The day before?
A day or two before. Yeah. So they went up to Calgary and they shot it, and it was, I just thought it was classic. It was fun to watch that take place and be able to get the legendary Stu Hart dungeon on a pay-per-view.
What did Owen think about having this match at the dungeon?
Everybody was cool with it. They loved the idea of it because it was simply...
It's simply 7 or 8 months after you screwed his brother, and now you're in his dad's house. You don't think that's a little fun?
A little fun?
That's a Vinceism if there ever was one. Hey, we fucked Bret, so let's get his dad to let us into his house.
The only Hart that Vince had heat with at that time was Bret. And, he talked to Stu, he talked to all of them. I mean, that was, was what it was. If there was heat with the Hart family, then why in the hell did Stu and Owen agree to do it?
Because Vince wanted to prove that he could. He wanted to continue to drive that stake and alienate and separate and see what he could get away with.
Please. It was simply use Stu, use the dungeon. Everybody was happy with it.
Was Stu compensated for you guys using the dungeon?
Probably so, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Hey, look, everything's fine. Look, they'll take my money. SummerSlam 1998, Madison Square Garden. Ken Shamrock and Owen Hart are here. Dan Severn is involved as well. Ken gets the victory. After about 9 minutes, he submits in a Lion's Den match here by reversing a Dragon Sleeper into the ankle lock. And this was held at the theater at MSG, adjacent to the arena. Do you remember this SummerSlam 98 match with Shamrock and Owen and Dan Severn's there?
Yeah, it was cool because the Paramount Theater right next to Madison Square Garden is where they used to have the overflow back in the old days. They would sell out the garden, and then they would do an overflow closed circuit in the Paramount Studios theater there. So it was a perfect place to set up the Lion's Den. It was it wasn't a size of a big ring. It was smaller than a ring. And then we could sell tickets to that, and we had the big screen up where people could watch the rest of the event live there as well. So I just always thought it was a neat little attraction.
So let's talk about the return of the Blue Blazer. Martha wrote in her book, running out of ideas on how to incorporate Owen into the WWF's madness, the brass decided he'd slowly evolve into the vintage Blue Blazer character he played almost a decade earlier during his initial run with the WWF. Mocking old school good guy wrestling icons like Hulk Hogan and Bret, the Blue Blazer would swoop into the ring wearing a humiliating blue feather-lined outfit, flapping his arms and sending fans into fits of hysterics. Wrestling fans had become so putrid and tainted thanks to the angry mob mentality bred by Vince McMahon that the Blue Blazer was spit upon and degraded on a nightly basis. Still, it was just part of the job. Armed with a shtick which he promised to right the wrongs of a horrible wrestling world run by a nefarious crop of foul-mouthed sexual deviants and scum, Owen peppered almost every interview with a comical reminder for children: say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and drink your milk, he said, before letting loose the trademark woo. Still, Owen was saddened to think children were watching it all. So those are Martha's words. Your take.
Well, you're going to say this is a cop-out, but it is what it is. This was Vince Russo, and it was an idea that he had to keep Owen relevant and not continue with the whole Owen Hart character as Owen Hart.
Martha would write in her book, in his last few years, he would often comment that he was getting older and felt he no longer fit into this new filthy world of wrestling. He was right. So very right. In an interview with Dan Gallagher on TSN on December 9th, 1998, on If Wrestling Had Gone Too Far, quote, "We are pushing the risque button. It's getting violent and a little cruder than I want. I make sure that I do as a pro athlete, both in and out of the ring, what is acceptable to my family and my friends. I want to uphold the Hart reputation of being a true professional." Those are Owen's words. Martha would continue in her book. Owen was now ashamed of his profession, and the days when he felt good about being a wrestler were over. And this all happens, November, December 1998 is what we're referencing. On the loop, we're seeing Steve Blackman and Goldust defeating Jeff Jarrett and Blue Blazer, and we're seeing Blackman working in singles matches with the Blazer. And behind the scenes, Owen is not that comfortable, at least according to Martha's testimony. Do you remember having conversations with Owen directly about him not really being comfortable with the way things were going in the Fed at the time?
Actually, no. And I've heard all the things. Like I said, I'm not going to question Martha, and I'm not going to question any of the things she said. I can simply tell you that my interaction with Owen and talking to him, and at that time, he never expressed any displeasure. He never expressed being upset with the business or not wanting to be there. As a matter of fact, he was having fun. So maybe that's just what he said to me, and he said something else when he got home. So sometimes you say something to your friends and you say something to the people you work with, and you go home and you share something completely different with those around you.
Martha wrote that Owen shot down the suggestion of Goldust putting Owen's hand on his crotch while they were in the ring. Do you remember Owen shooting that down?
I don't, but I can tell you that there were a lot of guys that were uncomfortable doing some of the things that they wanted to do. So if he did, that's not out of the ordinary.
Meltzer would report that, quote, "A few weeks ago, Owen was given his newest angle by the WWF creative team. He was supposed to get a crush on Deborah and feud with a jealous Jarrett. He turned it down, not wanting to put his wife and children through what they would have to go through. It's funny they asked, because a family precedent was set years ago when Davey was going to get a major singles title challenger push against Shawn Michaels based on an angle where they lead the audience to believe Michaels and Deanna were having an affair. Bret and Davey both immediately put the nix on that one. So they decided to revive the Blue Blazer, an angle they only did a few months ago and had gotten rid of, but this time with a new twist. The Blazer would be the nerd who represented the enemies of the WWF, the uncool people who said the WWF had gotten too raunchy, and also to mock the old Hulk Hogan. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and drink your milk. Kind of a modern day Bob Backlund character, but one that could actually do something inside the ring. Maybe they were grooming him for a sensational seat in today's environment. he is considered this as a punishment, and it was an office rib on their enemies, and he was going to have a good time playing the role anyway. That's Meltzer's testimony. About the Deborah angle, Martha wrote, they then wanted Owen to have a scripted affair with Deborah the valet, a buxom blonde who was supposedly dating Owen's new tag partner, Jeff Jarrett. The idea is that it would pit two partners against one another, and they went as low as to suggest I get involved in an interview for their monthly magazine with reactions to Owen's infidelity. It was sick. Owen didn't consider it for a minute and demanded the entire idea be scrapped. Do you remember anyone in the Hart family being anti infidelity angles?
Yeah, Owen. But going back to the Davey Boy, Shawn Michaels thing, we did that angle.
Yeah.
We did it, and
but I think he's suggesting y'all didn't take it as.
We constantly had Diana calling us with suggestions to do more. So that part is untrue. However, the whole gist of it, Owen did not want to do it. Owen was uncomfortable doing anything that would suggest something with another female, and Owen was uncomfortable with that, as are a lot of people, and a lot of people had said that they didn't want to do things. So again, it's not out of the ordinary for someone to say, you know what, I'm not comfortable, because now you're messing with real life. And when you have children, and when you have in real life, you're married and you have kids, and your kids have to go to school, and you're playing a part on television as yourself, it becomes confusing for young people to do. And Vince had absolutely zero problem with Owen saying that he was uncomfortable with doing that, and then didn't give it a second thought.
We're going to skip over what everybody would probably like for us to cover. We said we weren't going to cover it. If you're upset by that, too bad. We're just not going to. I do want to talk a little bit about Owen's legacy. Triple H has said in a few interviews that the nickname The Game was originally supposed to be intended for Owen, and that Triple H used it in honor of Owen after the fact. Have you heard that before?
I have not.
Kevin Steen, of course, was a phenomenal independent wrestler long before he signed with the WWE. And upon signing there, he had to change his name because the WWE wants to own everyone's name. And he changed his name to Kevin Owens. He did this because Owen was his absolute favorite wrestler, so much so that when his oldest son was born, as a tribute to Owen Hart, he named his son Owen and then adopted it as his wrestling name. So I think that's a pretty cool story. In interviews, Kevin Owens would say something along the lines of, when he was younger, he could always tell that Owen was having a blast in the ring, and that stuck with him. So after Owen passed away, every single person he spoke to would talk about what a great guy he was and how he would go out of his way to make people happy. He said that's what he wanted his son to be. And when he asked his wife to name their son Owen when she was pregnant, she agreed to it right away. Dave Hebner has said of Owen that he used to tie my shoelaces together when I went down for the count. That is just one of the many examples of the ribs that Owen Hart would play on the boys just to keep everything light. Jim Ross once said that he hoped he could be as good of a man as Owen so he could see him again someday. So the amount of respect that he carried in the business is pretty monumental. Mick Foley summed up Owen's life like this. Owen definitely had his priorities. Some people say they live for wrestling. I think they have it backwards. Owen had his priorities in the right order because he lived for his family and just wrestled to live. The family that Owen leaves behind now, of course, Natalia, she is the daughter of Jim Neidhart and the granddaughter of Stu and Helen Hart. She says, it's not hard for me to talk about Owen. Owen is a very special topic because he wasn't just your ordinary person. He really went above and beyond, going out of his way to touch people's lives. When he had a day or two off at home, he'd visit children's hospitals. People never knew that. There wasn't Instagram or Twitter or anything that he could post on, and it wasn't even something the WWF set up. Her perspective on Owen being in the Hall of Fame was, one day I do think that the WWE will have Owen in the Hall of Fame, and when they do it, it's going to be big and it's going to be really, really special. The WWE isn't going anywhere. It's going to be around for a very long time. When they pick someone to go in the Hall of Fame, it's a very selective process. I think you're going to see both Owen Hart and the British Bulldog in the Hall of Fame, but it's going to be at the right time. I know when both of them do eventually get inducted, it will be really special. We can celebrate as a family. I have complete faith that they will get in there. Of course, Tyson Kidd, TJ Wilson was a family member as well and had a very successful run with the company. Bret Hart did eventually come back to the company on January 4th, 2010. And along the way, he was pretty critical of the way everything happened. I think we've talked about this before, maybe in passing, but kind of catch everybody up, at least from your perspective. Why isn't Owen in the Hall of Fame?
I don't know. I can't give you a definitive answer. I can tell you what I've heard. I've heard that his family, meaning Martha, doesn't wish for him to be in it, and I think that the WWE would not do that without her blessing. So, that's all I've heard, but I can't tell you for a fact. I've never dealt with her. I've never talked to her about it, and that's the best I think of what's going on there. But you talk about Owen Hart. I think Mick Foley summed it up the best, and this is to tell you, kind of like Owen and his family. We used to look forward to the Wrestlemania parties to see how Owen and the family would come dressed to the parties, because they used to dress the kids up. And it's funny. You just talk about memories. This is a memory that I always had of them walking in with the kids dressed up in the cutest damn outfits, and Martha dressed to the nines, and Owen in a suit and tie or what have you. But that was their night out, and they were just the best looking family you ever saw in your life. And Owen was all about his family. He was all about his kids. He was all about his wife. And I think what Mick Foley said sums it up perfectly. That's it, and that's Owen in a nutshell. And I will forever remember him as one of the most beautiful people I've ever had the pleasure of knowing. And just, being able to sit there and bullshit with him and commiserate on being a baby brother with another bigger brother in the wrestling business, that no matter where you go, no matter what you do, it's like, oh, hey, aren't you Bret's brother? Or, hey, aren't you Tom's brother? And that, was something that we shared. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human being. Loved him to death.
Let's just kind of bounce around for a few minutes and just soak in some more Owen. Do you think Vince ever seriously considered putting the title on Owen? I mean, he had championship matches with Bret and Shawn.
Yes.
Why don't you think ultimately he got the nod? Was he still too small even later?
No, I think it was just simply other things came up and other people that he felt would be better suited. But there was a time when right after WrestleMania 10, during that whole run with Bret, that was brought up.
Let's talk about the Nation of Domination. He was briefly put with the Nation of Domination and nicknamed the Black Hart. A lot of people remember the impression that DX did of the Nation with Jason Sensation playing Owen Hart and his old famous line. But I don't know that that was maybe the right spot for him. How did that come about, him being a part of the Nation of Domination? Whose idea was that? Were you in favor, against?
Yeah, I wasn't a part of that, but I tell you, that just goes to show the range that Owen Hart could play. No matter what position you put him in, he would make something out of nothing. With the Slammies, when Owen went out and won 2 Slammies, there wasn't this long, grandiose plan of, okay, Owen's going to win 2 Slammies, and he's going to come to the ring with the 2 Slammies, and this is going to be another part of his character. It was, okay, the Slammies happen, and so on and so forth, and Owen took it upon himself to take both Slammies out to the ring and present those damn things as more important than the world championship, which they then became that important. And the way that Owen did everything, you gave him an inch and he would take 10 miles and make something out of nothing.
And he did that with the whole Nugget thing. You know, Sean refers to him as a Nugget in a promo, and then Owen would keep it going, coming out saying, "I'm not a Nugget." And that's a term that follows him around, you know, for the rest of his career. And when he's a part of the Nation of Domination, you know, given the feud he had just been in with Ken Shamrock, he's kind of like the co-leader of the Nation with The Rock there for a little while. And his catchphrase, do you remember what his catchphrase was that Jason Sensation used to mock?
Mad as hell. No, I don't know.
Enough is enough, and it's time for a change.
I said that earlier. Yeah. Okay.
And, you know, that kind of became his calling card before they went to the whole Blue Blazer thing. The Blue Blazer coming back, is that, when it happens in 98, 99, is that a Vince Russo idea?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about, some ribs. During a shoot interview with Ahmed Johnson, he says that he received a phone call saying he was going to be a featured guest on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. So he gets really fired up about this phone call, goes out, spends a bunch of money on new clothes, and he's told that a limousine is going to pick him up and deliver him to the studio. He waits forever, and then he says Hart appears and asked him why he wasn't at the show yet. Now Ahmed, suspicious as to how Hart could have known about his guest appearance, as he hadn't told anyone, said Hart was on the ground laughing, and he realized that it was Owen behind the ruse, and he was not going to be on the Tonight Show. You know, there's stories out there about how he used to hide Bret's boots in the shower and turn them on. And Bret would say that these ribs are really what he thrived on. It's what kept him from being homesick. And, you know, him having so much fun on the road is how he got through it. Road Dogg says that he was a ray of sunshine in literally every scenario. Bruce, is it fair to say that Owen is a guy who just had the respect of everybody in the business everywhere?
Absolutely. And I would venture to say, if you were to ask most people in the know, who was the best of the Harts, and I bet you even Bret would say this. They'd say Owen, the best worker and the best talent out of the entire Hart family.
Well, and he comes from, you know, a huge wrestling family. What a heritage they have. I think everybody listening already knows that, you know, about the stories about the dungeon and, his father, Stu, and obviously his whole family being in the business. One of a kind performer. And, it's a shame that his life was, cut short too soon. It is worth mentioning that, Owen met Martha when they were in school, and, they never broke up. They were together all the way to the very end. Do you have any memories of, Martha or the kids being at shows or anything like that you could share with us?
Well, just a story about, Wrestlemania, and always loving to see what coordinated outfits that they had together, because it was a foursome. And Martha would coordinate them, whether they were all sailors or just, they were a beautiful family. And my wife always looked forward to the Christmas cards that we got from the Hart family, both from Bret's family and from Owen's family, because they were always, you just get to watch the kids grow up through Christmas cards.
It's pretty awesome. They met in late 82. Martha Patterson is her maiden name. It's kind of a weird deal to talk about, I guess, but Owen was also, notorious for being frugal. Is that a fair way to say it? He didn't like to spend money on the road, much like we've heard about Mick
cheap.
Foley. Okay. Cheap. I like that. Supposedly he would develop friendships with a lot of fans, and he'd have fans pick him up at the airport so he didn't have to get a cab. And sometimes he'd even stay at their houses so he didn't have to get a hotel. They loved it, and he'd return the favor by treating them with respect, getting them tickets to the events, buying them dinner, letting them meet some of the other wrestlers. anything to save a buck or two. Do you remember any of those stories leading to anything hilarious, which we know had to happen?
Oh my God, he was brutal. He would rib them just as bad as he would rib the boys. There was an incident with a guy in Houston one time that said that he had a bunch of Paul Bosch's old uniforms that he wanted to give to Owen to give to Stu, because Paul Bosch introduced Stu and Helen. And it got into this huge uproar where the guy ended up calling the cops and claiming that Owen had stole the uniforms. And Owen turned it around on the guy with the cops to where essentially after this guy had called the cops on Owen had the cops turned around and basically escorting the guy off of the property at the old Greenway Plaza hotel where we were. And sorry, the guy was all just had worked himself into a shoot, and Owen just wanted to get the hell out of there and was trying to give the stuff back to the guy. He says, "I don't want your stinking uniforms." And then Owen got hot, just turned it right around on the guy and ended up basically getting the guy arrested and getting him thrown out of the hotel. But he just never stopped. He never stopped, whether it was on the airplane, like Earl Hebner talks about tying the shoes together or cutting your shoelaces off, whatever it was. And he would painstakingly go and put everything back just right so that you didn't notice it until it was too late. But he was a master ribber and just always one looking for the next prank.
There's lots of stuff out there about what happened with the Hart family after Owen passed away. Did you keep up with any of that?
I didn't. It was tragic. Everything was tragic, and you try to just remember the good in people, and you try to remember the good and the fun times. That's what I choose to do.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people would really like for us to dig into some of that, but it just feels out of place. We'd rather this be a positive. There's lots of stuff out there about the craziness that happened to the family after the screw job and then ultimately after Owen passed away. But we'll leave that for somebody else today. I can't help but, this is just ridiculous, and I don't know when we'll talk about it if we don't talk about it here. Meltzer wrote various press estimates that there were between 1,500 and 3,000 people that attended the most publicized wrestling funeral in Northern America of the modern era. Bret said at the funeral, his brother Owen was too good for the spectacle of what pro wrestling had turned into. I don't know why, but I found it odd that Meltzer reports the attendance of the funeral and then says CNN reported 3,000, but most reports were closer to the former figure, as if it's a house and they're selling t-shirts or something.
Dignify that. Fuck you. That's, please.
Well, can you send us out on a high note here? Can we get one last Owen Hart rib? It's a shame that, we've got to talk about,
the probably one of the best was going out on a high, because Owen didn't give a shit. Owen did not discriminate when it came to ribs. And there was the pig match that we had in Hershey, Pennsylvania, with Henry Godwin and
Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Triple A.
Yeah.
And afterwards, when we're trying to get the pigs out of there, and they stayed there all night long, and when it was time to go, they brought them out through a side vomitory entrance. And coming along that way, right off of that entrance, was Vince's office. So as the pigs were going through, Owen and Steve Taylor kind of redirected the pigs into Vince's office and just kind of let them root around in there a little bit. So that was a lot of fun. But it was again, harmless, just fun pranks like that you always kind of look around and go, damn it, Owen, And no matter what rib it was or what Bulldog might have done, the classic one was whenever there was a rib in Bulldog, there's pictures of Davey Boy Smith shaving off someone's eyebrows. And when confronted with the pictures, Davey Boy uttered the famous line, "I wasn't even there. It was on." And when they showed him the picture, he goes, "That's not me. It's fucking Owen. He doctored the picture. I wasn't even there. It was on." So that became kind of a standard, no matter whatever happened, you just immediately go in denial mode. It wasn't me. It was on. So that's all I got.
Do you remember?
Sorry, I'm sick.
Do you remember any fun Blue Blazer ribs? Towards the end, at least on TV, we see Owen trying to prove that he's not the Blue Blazer. So he comes out and then stands next to the Blue Blazer, who's actually the masked Jeff Jarrett. And then later they redo it, and this time it's obviously a black guy, Coco Beware. Pretty fun stuff here for the Blue Blazer. Do you remember there being any sort of fun Blue Blazer ribs that you can recall?
Unfortunately, I don't. I mean, that was it. I mean, that was just kind of the character. The fun stuff was all with Owen, just being Owen and being bored on the road and having fun with other people, other people's expense, and just trying to make people laugh and lighten things up.
Well, what we'd like to do to honor Owen for the next week is go ahead and have you guys tweet us at Prichard Show your favorite Owen match. Maybe there's a link on YouTube. Maybe it's your favorite promo. Maybe it's something you've seen online. You can go ahead and tag those, and please do. Let's celebrate the life of Owen and his career for the next week here on Prichard Show. Just tweet us at Prichard Show, and you can also check out next week's poll there. It's going to be posted. We will do a bonus show for you. You've got 2 coming your way as soon as Bruce is feeling up to snuff. But in the meantime, you can vote on what we might talk about next week right here at the Bruce Prichard Show. Something to wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Just go ahead and check us out on Twitter at Prichard Show. I've said it like 19 times so far. How about one more? At Prichard Show. And let's go back and forth again, Bruce. It's time again. What do you want? Poll topic number 1.
Well, since we're in the mode, it wasn't me. How about the British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith?
I like it. That's a good one. I'm a fan of Davey Boy Smith, and I think that will be a fun poll for us to do. I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to go back to something that I've wanted to talk about, but for whatever reason, hasn't won a poll yet. I want to bring it back, maybe for the last time. The WWF going public. I think this is the day that the wrestling business changed forever. No longer is Vince the only guy in charge. Now he's got a board to answer for. He's got shareholders to consider. And I think the wrestling business changed forever that day. So my choice for poll topic number 2 is the day the WWF went public. Bruce, what's poll topic number 3?
Well, since he's got a movie coming out and is going to be in the news, already in the news, all over the place, how about Mr. Dave Bautista? And we could talk about the very first time he walked in and somebody said to me, he goes, "I don't need another Goldberg wannabe." In Dave Bautista and his career in the WWE.
Well, I say maybe best for last because I hope you'll be feeling better by next week, and I think this will be fun. Owen Hart was a member of his camp. I want to do Jim Cornette in the WWF. A lot of people didn't see him on a Hall of Fame stage by any stretch of the imagination, but that shit really happened, and we would love to go ahead and talk about Jim Cornette in poll topic number 4. So let's recap. The British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith in the WWF. That is poll topic number 1. Poll topic number 2, the WWF goes public. Don't want to miss that one. That should be a good time. The business changed forever. Maybe one of the most important days in the history of professional wrestling. Poll topic number 3, Big Dave Bautista. All the incarnations, Ohio Valley Wrestling, everything that happened. This should be a fun story. But the one I'm rooting for most of all, just because of the impressions, can you imagine? Bruce can't do it right now, but maybe next week, Jim Cornette in the WWF. How in the world did this happen? There have to be some hilarious stories, and I hope that wins. Go ahead and follow Bruce on Twitter. He is at Bruce Prichard. I, of course, am on Twitter at Hey It's Conrad. And as always, you can check our show out and vote on this week's poll at Prichard Show. We're sorry that Bruce was under the weather this week. There were a lot less impressions than normal. The show was a little different, but hey man, we worked hard to give you a show. Bruce, I appreciate you soldiering through when you really didn't feel that great today.
I'm alive. It's all good, man. It's all good. So I just, I wanted to do this. We talked about having a sub, and I just didn't feel that was the right damn thing to do. It's maybe a little rough listening to me, but by God, just soldier on through it. No worries.
Well, I know what would make you feel better, and that's if people would cruise on over to brucepritchard.com, pick up a t-shirt, go to notarib.com and pick up a ticket to come see us right there in St. Louis, or cruise on over to Live Nation. VIP's already sold out, but you can see us Summerslam weekend. It's something to wrestle with Bruce Prichard. Just throw it in your Live Nation search bar or your Ticketmaster search bar, and you won't miss it. It's the day before SummerSlam. You're not going to have to pick this or NXT. It's a matinee show, guys, 12:30. You can come enjoy us and make us a part of your SummerSlam weekend experience. NYC, man, tickets are moving fast. VIP's already gone, so check it out. Notarib.com for St. Louis, livenation.com for New York, and where do we go for the UK, Bruce?
Go to hookedonevents.co.uk for July 16, 17, and 18 over in the beautiful United Kingdom.
And don't forget,
hookedonevents.co.uk.
Tweet us all of your favorite Owen Hart interviews, all of your favorite Owen Hart matches, include the links. Let's create a sense of community. You can do this on Twitter at Prichard Show, and you can do it on our forum. It's at whwradio.com. I'm sure there'll be lots of Owen stories, memories, matches, and promos over at whwradio.com. Until next week, we'll see you right here on MLW Radio's very own Something to Wrestle with Bruce Prichard. See, I switched it up that time. I put the with in there too, just to keep people on their toes.
I noticed that.
The world of MLW Radio never stops.